waiting to upgrade my MacBook Pro because of that, because I hated the flat touch ones.
Yeah.
I actually was looking, and someone did say that they're bringing it back on the 16. So I'm like desperately waiting to see if they bring them back.
Yeah, that's been essentially confirmed as much as it can be before an event like this. So it seems at this point incredibly likely that's the case.
Ehon, Tyler.
Okay, one second. I'm just pinning the tweet, the stream tweet.
Yes.
Okay. So welcome back, everybody. Here we go. And my God, there's more tweets than we have ever seen before in the history of tech news that people have tweeted in since we met last time. And that's cool. We'll try and get to as many as we can. But first, as always, we go through the big headlines that your cousins and coworkers are talking about. The really, really popular tweets or stories based on Twitter activity. So here they are. The top one today, Monday, October 18th, 2021, is from the Wall Street Journal that there's internal documents. I guess this is a continuation of the Facebook files because that's what Wall Street Journal is calling these internal documents from Facebook. So, internal documents, Facebook's AI has minimal success enforcing its rules against problematic content, including removing just an estimated 3 to 5% of hate speech, according to this internal. Yep, they are branding this as part of their Facebook files. Jeff Horowitz ongoing series from whistleblower Miss Hagen. What remind me Miss Hagen's first name? Where did it go? Here we go. Facebook executives have long said the AI would address the company's chronic problems, keeping what it deems hate speech and excessive violence, as well as underage users off its platform. That future is farther away than those executives suggest, according to internal documents reviewed by the Wall Street Journal. Facebook's AI, Frances Haugen, is the whistleblower who's providing all of these documents to the Wall Street Journal. And it was said that she had stayed an extra month after realizing that she wanted to leave Facebook. She stayed an extra month to hoover up thousands of documents. And this is one of those documents. Strangely, again, they don't show the document in this Wall Street Journal article. Let me click this link in the article I'm reading because it says, okay, so here it is. Well, again, they don't actually show the document, and that's kind of a problem for the Wall Street Journal. Here's why. The story is about a document, an internal document that Frances Haugen leaked to Jeff Horowitz at the Wall Street Journal. And this article says Facebook knows in acute detail that its platforms are riddled with flaws that cause harm, often in ways that only the company fully understands. That is the central finding of the Wall Street Journal series based on review of internal documents, blah, 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 blah. And now they've made a nice little website dedicated to the Facebook files. They now say they're on number 10, which is this newest one. Facebook says AI will clean up the platform. Its own engineers have doubts. And that's the one we're reading here today. However, I'm reading the article. I'm looking for the document. The document isn't really there.
Tyler, is it possible that this didn't leak from that particular person? It leaked from someone else, and
Yeah.
they're trying to protect that person? Just like the situation you mentioned with Apple, where maybe something was planted, or they can identify it, and maybe that's why they're not showing it.
Well, they said she has has thousands of earth-shaking documents. Okay, so if it's not hers, why are they now using somebody else's if she's got thousands of earth-shaking documents? And if she's got thousands of earth-shaking documents, why aren't they sharing them? Because so far, they've shared exactly 0 of them. Facebook has, they said they had one that said that Instagram, knows that Facebook knows is bad for kids, but then they didn't share the document in their story. And Facebook said, hang on, are you talking about this document? And Facebook did share the document. And they had no problem sharing the document because that document, taken in its full context, says, actually, Facebook net's pretty fucking good and pretty incredibly helpful to young people. So is this the document you're talking about that you wrote that hit piece about, where you cherry picked one data point out of 25 and ignored the other 24 data points that counter your narrative? Is this the document you're talking about that we want the world to see, and we can explain what's really going on to avoid your activism journalism hit piece? And then, of course, with egg on the... Yeah, that is the document we're talking about. I guess. Yeah, I guess we're not really journalists because we're not really doing journalism. We saw the document and we didn't say... we didn't do the normal journalist process of saying we saw a document that said the following. We just said we just noticed this one little bit that we thought, we just would focus on the really nitty gritty piece that we thought people, that we really want to paint you out as an evil empire. So we just focused on that piece and not the 24 data points that actually make you look like you're actually pretty good, actually. So yeah. So now we know why you didn't share the document, because you're not doing journalism. And so when they've got these additional thousands of hot documents, as they themselves say that they have, so interesting that you've yet to share any. And then today with this new story about how Facebook says its AI will clean up the platform, its own engineers have doubts. You can understand why I want to say, show me the document, because now I don't trust your ass, because you're not doing journalism, you're doing activism. So show me that document that says that, so I can decide for myself what it really says, because you've already proven that any of these so-called documents, it's very likely that you're just cherry picking out one sentence out of a whole fucking PDF that's full of positive shit, and you found the one sentence that you want to run up the hill and, claim that they're, Hitler reincarnate. Let me decide for myself. Show me the document. So in this case, there is a screenshot, and it says source internal report was titled "Harmful Non-Violation Narratives." That's the name of this internal report. It looks like a document. It looks like a screenshot that Miss Hagen or somebody internally took a screenshot and did send. So it says, content-focused integrity playbooks have been ineffective for these problems. We have struggled to fully mitigate this category of harms in the past. This can be attributed to a few common patterns with common roots in our normally healthy bias towards voice in ambiguous and complex problem spaces. Holy shit, is that how they talk in Facebook? That's some weird grad school type speak there. Content-focused enforcements. Our focus on scaled content level enforcement in practice means the volume of decisions which need to be made is impossible for human reviewers to keep up with. And so we apply classifiers to make content level decisions at scale. So their algorithm, you can't do it. It's too big to do with humans. That make our focus on scaled content level enforcement, meaning moderating all of Facebook in practice, is too big for humans to do. Yeah, obviously, you got 3 billion users making content. You're going to need maybe 100 million people to moderate that content effectively, and that doesn't work unless you want to employ 100 million people, that just doesn't scale. So yeah, you're going to have to do it algorithmically. And so they make classifiers to make content level decisions at scale, meaning we use algorithms to do the moderation. This approach shines where content level decisions can happen without considering context, but it's extremely challenging to implement where such content is required. For example, we estimate that we may action as little as 3 to 5% of hate. Here's the main quote, and they even pull this sentence out of the screenshot right here. Here's the money. It's one sentence. As I said, they're cherry picking one sentence. Here's the one sentence, even out of this screenshot of text. For example, we estimate that we may action on as little as 3 to 5% of hate and negative 0.6% of V&I on Facebook, despite being the best in the world at it. Okay. So they found a sentence of somebody at Facebook sharing an internal report. The name of the report, again, is Harmful, Non-Violating Narratives. And this is the big story. That's the top story today. Now, Facebook has now already rebutted this article from the Facebook files about the percentage of the data point that was shared, cherry picked, that one sentence that was picked out of that document. Facebook disputes report that this is a new headline from a separate publication, The Verge. Facebook disputes report that its AI can't detect hate speech or violence consistently. The Wall Street Journal said in a new report that Facebook's AI is not consistently successful at removing objectionable content, but Facebook's Vice President of Integrity, Guy Rosen, just wrote in a blog post on Sunday, that was yesterday, that the prevalence of hate speech on the platform has dropped by 50% over the past 3 years, and that a narrative that the technology we use to fight hate speech is inadequate, and that we deliberately misrepresent our progress was false. We don't want to see hate speech on our platform, nor do our users or advertisers, and we are transparent about our work to remove it, Rosen said. What these documents demonstrate is that our integrity work is a multi-year journey. While we will never be perfect, our teams continually work to develop our systems, identify issues, and build solutions. The post appeared to be in a response to the Sunday article of the Wall Street Journal. So there you go. They're addressing it in the same day. ASAP, lickety split, brilliant. You're now doing exactly what I said a company should do when these other Facebook files were coming out. It's like, you got to fucking respond to this shit on the dime immediately to help control the narrative, because they didn't do that in those early files and leaks. And that whole Instagram article, they took several days to respond to that. And had they sent out their response super fast, it would have minimized a lot of the blowback. So the post appears to be a response to the Sunday article, which said that Facebook employees tasked with keeping offensive content off their platform don't believe the company is able to reliably screen for it. The Wall Street Journal report states that internal documents show that 2 years ago, Facebook reduced the time that human reviewers focused on hate speech complaints and made other adjustments that reduced the number of complaints. That in turn helped create the appearance that Facebook's artificial intelligence had been more successful in enforcing the company's rules than it actually was, according to the Wall Street Journal. A team of Facebook employees found in March that the company's automated systems were removing posts which generated 3 to 5% of the views of hate speech on the platform and less than 1% of all content that was in violation of its rules against violence. But Rosen argued that focusing on content removals alone was the wrong way to look at how we fight hate speech. He says the technology to remove hate speech is just one method Facebook uses to fight it. We need to be confident that something is hate speech before we remove it. Instead, he said the company believes focusing on the prevalence of hate speech people actually see on the platform and how it reduces it using various tools is a more important measure. He claims that for every 10,000 views of a piece of content on Facebook, there were 5 views of hate speech. Prevalence tells us what violating content people see because we missed it. Prevalence tells us what violating content people see because we missed it, Rosen says. It's how we most objectively evaluate our progress as it provides the most complete picture. I think what he's implying there is removing it isn't the only solution. We can minimize it. We can shadow ban it. We can hide bad content. And if people flag it, we might not remove it, but we sure do shadow ban it to be held for moderation to decide to remove it. And while it's in that shadow banning flagged phase, it's not really being seen. So the amount of visibility of hate speech is incredibly low. As he says, 5 out of 10,000. which is 10 out of 10,000 would be one in 1,000. So this is one in 1,000 is 0.1%. So this is 0.05%. So it only gets seen. So it doesn't matter if we remove it. You're barking up the wrong tree. Yeah, we only technically remove. They're not even disputing that point that we remove 5 to 6% of hate speech. But more importantly, hate speech isn't really being seen. We don't actually technically need to have it removed for it to be not seen. But the other main point that they're trying to do, the other counter narrative that they're positing here is that they have reduced the visibility of hate speech by 50%. They said that the prevalence, and that's the key word, the prevalence of hate speech on the platform has dropped 50% over the past 3 years. That has nothing to do with removing it. We don't need to remove it. Removing it's not the entire solution. We can reduce the prevalence of it. We can make it less visible. And that's what matters. So again, you can understand how, if Facebook had been very slow to respond in this way, like they were previously with the Instagram, is bad for young ladies data point, people will run into the wind with half cockamamie ideas about, if we saw the slide, only 5% of hate speech is removed from Facebook. That means if you put up hate speech, you have a 95% chance of that hate speech being seen on Facebook. No, not at all. It has a 0.05% chance of being seen on Facebook. Half of 1/10 of 1%, not 95%. Those are two totally different numbers. You don't have a 95% chance of your hate speech being seen. You have less than half of 1%, 1/10 of 1%. Very, 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 very different. And so here's my point is, had Facebook not come out with their data, and we take, we're kind of assuming that they're being straightforward in this. I very rarely see hate speech. That's consistent with my own personal viewing history of Facebook. But then again, I don't have a lot of idiot friends on Facebook, and I've been incredibly tight in curating all of the people that I've friended over the years on Facebook. I don't add people who, unless I've known them for years. So what's the point I want to make here is the point is there was the possibility, assuming that Facebook had not responded to this article in the same day. Kudos to you, Facebook. Your crack team of PR folks that are hot on the reply button there. And now you've neutralized this new narrative that was being formed against you, that you only remove 5% of hate speech on your platform. And believe me, had Facebook not responded to this, here's what happens. Wall Street Journal does their internal document. They publish it. They've already told their friends at the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post and everywhere else, hey, you want to help me? Here, we got this one coming out in a couple hours. Check it out. We're going to do this. Why don't you go ahead and start writing your related piece now to boost our piece, and we'll create this meta narrative. And this is the important part. Facebook is not only at war with the Wall Street Journal with these Facebook files. The Wall Street Journal is employing all of their friends at the other publications, most notably the New York Times, and etc. There's many of them, and they all gang up and they all flood the zone with this mass. They try and push this huge narrative that, oh my God, holy smolies, Facebook's only removing 5% of hate speech. And they create this whole false narrative, right? So Facebook, by addressing it as fast as humanly fucking possible, pop a pin in those balloons, because if Facebook can respond before those other publications hit publish, it makes them look like amateur idiots for reiterating something that's already been addressed. Thoughts?
Michelle is in the audience and some others.
Beautiful.
Tyler, I had a question. So, is this really an issue related to the American market, or is this a global issue?
I don't know. That's a good question, though.
Because there's so much emphasis and the conversation and everything, and like you said, 2-3 billion people around the world. You've got uprisings in different countries. You've got elections. You've got things going on. But this seems to be just an American issue, from everything that I'm hearing. So I'm wondering if it's really something that they're having an issue and they have to deal with it globally, or just U.S.
I don't know, but how often are we seeing hate speech on Facebook? It's an interesting.
I'm seeing less on a personal note. I'm seeing less since Trump has left office.
Yeah, well, they said in the past 3 years they've reduced it by the prevalence, and that's the important bit here. And I love how they're bringing, and this is again why Facebook is saying, hey, that about why they have last week, towards the end of last week, Thursday, Friday, the headline was, Facebook is now tightening down who has access to certain documents within Facebook. Because what Frances Haugen, the whistleblower, was able to do was Facebook was quite remarkably unique and kind of wildly unique in that they allowed all of their 100,000 employees to search all the documents that anybody ever said, even across companies, from Instagram, where Frances Haugen had access to documents of Instagram presentations that she doesn't even work at Instagram. And so she's sharing Instagram documents with the Wall Street Journal that she really doesn't understand herself. She wasn't in those meetings or involved in those teams or those documents. So that, and Facebook has said, listen, we're tightening it down because we don't really like the idea that people are sharing documents that they don't understand and don't understand the full context of. And in this particular recent today's story, narrative, counter narrative, boy, is that a great example where the slide, the data point that was shared and cherry picked and highlighted is really not, could really give people the really false idea of what's really going on with regard to hate speech on Facebook. That, hey, turns out, so we only remove 5 or 6% algorithmically. So what? We remove 99.99% based on other ways.
Tyler, I have a comment on this. I think that while I applaud whatever they're doing to try to do this, so this is not a criticism of their achievement, but I am going to say that there is no baseline. We do not know whether it takes 0.01% poison to make your coffee poison or whether it takes 95% poison to make it poison. And I think the observation and evidence suggests that it doesn't take a lot to sway things from this way to that way. That even like 1% can make a huge difference. So I think that's something to keep in mind.
Well,
and in terms of the global,
let me respond real quickly to that one, which is, I've never heard of it. I've heard a lot of reasons why people stop using Facebook. I've never heard of hate speech as being one of those reasons.
I agree with that. Yeah. I've reduced my usage because the app is a hog and just makes my computer too slow.
Right. I'm like I said, I can name a dozen reasons why people have stopped using Facebook. Hate speech has never been. I've never heard hate speech as an issue with Facebook. I don't think hate speech is actually an existential issue to Facebook.
You're right on. That is consistent with my observation as well.
Well, Tyler, I would say this, in my, small, circle of friends on Facebook, which is mostly my high school and college friends. I usually keep it to that.
Yeah.
We've all stopped posting a lot because we have different views on politics, and we didn't want to become enemy with our longtime friends. And so everybody just doesn't post because, other than like birthdays and weddings, that's all they post now. And because people were posting a little bit more on social issues and political issues until everyone realized that there's this is an American issue. There's the 50-50 divide. So so I think it's not exactly hate speech, but it's the people are using it less because other than sharing your kid's birthday or something, that's it.
I imagine there's another function, which is I imagine I'm not unique in noticing that mm, the Facebook that I know has gone from being profiles historically used to kind of be set to public by default. And now the vast majority of people that I engage with on Facebook have set their profiles to a much more private type of profile where so they're only sharing with friends where they used to share publicly.
Oh yeah, I've always had mine on private because I kind of anticipated where we worked, today many years ago. So I have always set mine on private, and I think a lot of my friends basically have a lot of it on private. But even with that, it's kind of as I said, a small circle. But we've tested out. People have tried putting more other things on besides just what your family's doing, and it could get very toxic, particularly when before the election. So everyone doesn't talk a lot about that.
Thinking about
I
Meta's
think
question as to whether it's a U.S. phenomena, and I guess I'm thinking about because I have a pretty diverse set of Facebook friends from different parts of Asia and Africa and Europe, and I find that to your point, my American friends tend to use it just as you've described, but I also think about how some of my contacts from Nepal and Myanmar. I mean, it certainly varies by country. But as I shared last week, I find that people share even more information on Facebook, particularly people in Bangladesh, Vietnam. They use it as a hybrid between, you know, Facebook and LinkedIn and I'm selling some cookies, so I really do think that it varies by country for that reason, just because different markets have different levels of access to other platforms. And then also because different governments have different restrictions on what can publicly be stated. And the US is probably least restrictive, compared to some of the Asian and African countries.
I think the reason here in Ethiopia as well, especially during the election thereafter, this is why the government of Ethiopia came up with, getting someone to be developing its own social media, because I'm not sure if Facebook has a way to understand what are, hate speech or I don't know, false information, all that misinformation, all things like that. Because here in Ethiopia, it is a very diverse, multi ethnicity country. And there was a lot of misinformation flying around on Facebook. To a much, much lesser extent on Twitter as well. So it was, even for me, I decided not to look at it at all. I didn't, like I said, I didn't delete my Facebook, but I decided not to be active at all because I just can't figure out what's what, and the ethnicity and some of the hate speech that you see, the misinformation that you see that flies around from different parts of the country. It just was just too much. So for me, it's a bit difficult, and I think it was also a bit difficult for government, and I think that's why they were coming up with that type of solution.
So I wanted to
Yeah, go ahead.
add one thing.
Yeah, go.
Sorry.
18.
Thanks. So I found myself in the last, I'd say 10 to 15 years, trying to find other places to look or to entertain myself or to find information. First, I gave up magazines of any kind. I don't know, 2005, 6, something like that, simply because I found the content in like People magazine, whatever, you name it, just things you buy at the grocery counter, right? Skewing in a negative fashion. It was always like gossip, and I just don't like it. Then social media comes along and it was fun. We were throwing sheep at each other and there was poking, and, Facebook first came along. Twitter, I loved. Twitter was my thing. Gamergate came along and that was negative. And so there was a reason to sort of like try and skew yourself, follow people that were less so hatred. I think the election as an American for sure caused this. And I'm Gen X, like solid Gen X. So my friends went batshit crazy. And I myself couldn't handle it. So I think around 2017 abandoned Facebook completely. I haven't posted anything on there since then, but I keep it simply because I cultivated 10 years plus of contacts from back in my childhood, 40 years worth of people who you just you connect with. And that's all over the globe, similar to Lakeisha, who I've met, who I've known, family, friends, you name it. And tried to look for other platforms. Surprisingly enough, not everybody's on those. They haven't adopted them. My generation, at least, is really solidly on Facebook. And now I've found new friends. I mean, I've gone, places like Clubhouse and other places where I'm actually finding people who I haven't known very long, who I'm actually more aligned with in terms of how I think, how I feel, what I do for a living. I think part of the reason I'm sharing that information is that I'm hoping that if Facebook is really investing in finding a way to bring people back together or in changing the way that their algorithm works, I would be all for that. And so part of me understands why these people are doing the things that they're doing. My only hope is that that's a thing of the past, and that those people who are still at Facebook and people who believe in it, even though I've kind of abandoned the platform, are doing it because they know that the only way that we're going to get better is to kind of go through all of these times and then invest in something new or something different from what we've done in the past. Anyways, thank you.
Sure. I wanted to see if,
Tyler, if I
yeah,
can just, I'm so sorry. If
go ahead.
I was just going to add that, I mean, the reason I said this, because think about it, it's being written at the Wall Street Journal. So it's a publication that a lot of people around the world, if not, they'll, their main people in government and in offices and businesses, they're reading what's happening in the Wall Street Journal because they're looking at it as a guide of what's going on, as they putting their finger on the pulse of what's happening in the world, right? So, you may even have local newspapers in different countries picking up this story, and it turns into, I mean, I'm trying to look at it from a balanced view from Facebook's eyes. And, if this is really, it seems to me that it's really more of an American issue, or if it's being some kind of a, an incentive from the American side or whatever, if it's politics or business behind it. But it seems to me that this is something that is being spread or is going to be spread. I'm sure it already has on a bigger level in countries, and a discussion that maybe necessarily didn't have these, the same kind of issues. I mean, how Americans use Facebook, I'm seeing it because I'm looking at it from three different cultures. I'm in three different cultures. So, just based on my experience, how Americans use Facebook is very different on how other cultures are using it. Just like you said, just like Ken said, just like myself, I'm connected to friends and people that I haven't talked to or seen maybe in 20, 25 years from back in the days, from my old, business days, my offices, my friendships, school, whatever. And in some way, at the same time, I'm seeing, myself using Facebook less because I saw what a divide the elections and everything else that was happening. What happened? Friendships stopped. People started talking behind each other's backs, and a lot of things that maybe I mean, I can't only put that on Facebook. I mean, it's just kind of the isms. That's what's going on through friendships and through the times, sign of times. But it's really different. I mean, I'm still seeing, just like Lakeisha said, and you know, people in other countries are still using it for different purposes, or what Messi also said, they're using it for different things, and they're keeping it as simple as literally just forwarding each other's new information or business informations, contacts, friendships, and they're kind of keeping it simple to kind of what I think originally what Facebook was in the beginning. So I'm just kind of wondering that this Wall Street Journal article, or this not just articles, I should say, what's happening is that it's an American issue that's now being spread probably across the globe as an issue on Facebook that maybe doesn't necessarily have to do anything with other cultures or other countries.
I'd be careful to take it that far. I think we're assuming that this is a U.S. issue. I have no clue, but I imagine hate speech is not unique to the U.S. Sorry to whoever I interrupted. Go ahead, and then Michelle, if you have a thought on this, I would love to hear it. Kind of just on the issue of, for example, that the Wall Street Journal traditionally. The problem is that we don't have the bio. Hold on. The problem is that we do not, and possibly never will have, a model that captures every majority of it. I guess traditionally, the Wall Street Journal, in a scenario like this, where they acquire some kind of information about a company that seems particularly damning, they would then reach out to that company for comment. That's journalism. You're a journalist. Oh, you hear hey, somebody contacts you. You're at your news desk, we're writing, doing some tech news journalism. You get somebody pings you and says, "Hey, I got something that might be story worthy. I got a possible story." Okay, great. What is it? Oh, well, I got this document here from the company I work at, from a separate team that I'm not on, that says our AIs are not working, is only removing 3 to 5% of hate speech. That seems kind of low. And even in the document, they themselves say, this is really challenging, and, wow, it's kind of an issue. Okay, great. Yeah, let me see that document.
To come in on this question of the U.S.
Yeah, well, yeah, go ahead, Meg, 1 second. But then that normally a tech journalist will then say, okay, hey, Facebook, would you please provide a comment about this? That right there, that piece where the journalist says, "Oh, thank you. Let me see that document. Can I have that for use that story? Thank you very much. Would you like me to name you in the article or not? Would you like to be off the record? Okay, thank you very much. Ring, ring, ring. Hey, this is Bobby over at Bloomberg. We just got this thing. I'll send it over to you. Would love your comment. We're going to write a story about that. And please, if you want to, I'm telling you this because I've dealt with this personally dozens of times over the past decade, where they will then call up and say, we're looking at this document. We'll probably run a piece on this probably tomorrow by noon Pacific time. We'd love to include your comment. Please feel free to, hit me back at this number anytime, blah, blah, blah. Bye-bye. That's the norm. That's how the sausage gets made. Guess what? That's how it works. That is fucking journalism. That is the game. That's how it's played. Those are the fucking rules. Those are the rules of journalism. That's what you do. That's what your professor said to do. That when you went to journalism school, that's what your editors have been telling you since you started working there in the mailroom. And guess what? They're not doing that. They didn't do that at all. They got the information. They're like, ooh, let's pick out the best bits. Okay. Ooh, that sentence looks good. Let's run with that. The idea of calling Facebook to get the fuller, broader picture of what's going on. No. We're not doing that at all. We're not in that. Well, hang on. That's that old journalism thing that people used to do. We're not doing that. We're the Wall Street Journal, not doing journalism. We're the Wall Street not journal. We're the Wall Street non-journalist. What the fuck are you? You're not doing journalism. You're
Tyler. Usually, there's a single line when the company does not want to respond.
right.
They say they whatever. You're saying that line
Correct.
was not even.
No.
Wow.
Normally they would say we reached out for comment and there was no comment. Of course, Facebook is dying to comment. They wrote a blog post an hour after this Wall Street Journal article was released to counter the narrative. If they had been contacted, Facebook would say, "Oh, thank you so much for contacting us. Here, yes, of course we'd like to make a comment." But they weren't given that luxury, so they had to release their own blog post separately. That is activism. That's not journalism. You are an activist. You're a fucking blogger, Wall Street Journal. You're a fucking hack blogger now. That's all you are. You are no better than the fucking Facebook commenter, the YouTube crackpot commenters and Reddit commenters. You've reduced yourself to that. You've removed the process of journalism. Go ahead, Meg.
Sorry, I don't want to go back to the earlier topic because I think that's an important point that you're making, and I think it is unfortunate if they didn't practice the normal journalistic standards in this article. But I just wanted to come back to the question about whether this is just a U.S. issue, and I think that Messi also made the point earlier that it really is not just a U.S. issue, that we've seen a lot of problems with hate speech and, with alleged playing a role in genocide, even in Myanmar and in other countries. So I think the challenge for Facebook and other large tech companies in the US is to understand what is hate speech in other countries and in other languages, and that can be extremely complicated.
Sure.
And similarly, it can be very, very complicated for people in those countries to hold Facebook accountable because they're a US company. So it's hard enough if some company comes in and does like a chemical spill in your country to hold them accountable if they're from the US. But it's even harder with Facebook because there aren't really clear legal standards and obligations for what they should be doing. Just wanted to add that point.
I could be wrong now, and I'm happy to eat my shoe here. I hope I'm wrong. They talk about Guy Rosen where he says prevalence is the most important. Oh, I think they're quoting. How did this come about? We asked what's the numerator, what's the the company often says this. Facebook spokesperson Andy Stone said that these percentages referred to. Okay, when did you talk to Andy Stone? According to the document, the problem he estimates. According to the documents, those responsible, the problem. It says Facebook spokesperson Andy Stone said that these percentages referred to posts that were removed by AI and didn't include other actions the company takes to reduce how many people hate. Facebook says by that measure, the prevalence of content. Apparently, they do get comments in. They include the counter narrative, the Facebook perspective in this article.
And they have this other comment that you read earlier from this guy named Guy Rosen, who's like
Yeah.
the Facebook head of integrity. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I'm confused. How did you get a quote from this other blog post unless you edited your post? I'll have to read the whole thing thoroughly. So they did include Facebook's narrative that counters the narrative of the original story later on in the article. I'm not exactly sure how that came about, if they updated it or whatever. Sorry. Thank you for that point, Meg. Michelle, did you have anything to toss into the mix here?
No, I was. I think I was just gonna say that I don't think it's just U.S. related, and I do the language question is a fair question, but we also use a mix of different techniques to battle hate speech or any other form of content we don't want on the platform. So it's not just human being moderators picking those languages that will be leveraged. And I also just think on the other side, people need to understand the platform experience would have been a nightmare if we were actually just taking out 5% of things. No one could even use that because the reality is that people trying to upload horrendous content every single second. So I think just also putting that in perspective might show why it's impossible. We're only taking down 5% of hate speech.
It seems, I'm looking through the article now, it's quite long, this one. It's very long. It seems they're taking Guy Rosen's comments from a 2018 interview he did on Frontline. Anyway, so.
And also, just quickly on that, we do have this report that we do on a quarterly basis. It's called the Community Standard Enforcement Standard Report. And it would have been interesting for them to take a look at it as well, because it actually
Right.
has all these numbers even
Precisely.
before the article.
Precisely my point. Because here's why I mentioned this. Because if they had contacted Facebook and said, "Hey, Facebook, we're going to run this article tomorrow. We'd love to include your thoughts on this." That's how it's always. Michelle can confirm. That's how it's done. That's the process. It happens hundreds of times a day on every article you read. There's always quotes from the people involved in the story, or there's a refusal to comment. We read that dozens of times a day here in Tech News Around the World. And Cheryl and I, we even have a joking meme about it of like, we reached out and they didn't comment, no comment, or they decided not to comment. This is the norm. The journalist always reaches out. And oftentimes when they reach out, whoever they're reaching out to refuses to comment. That's fine. And then the article says, we reached out and they refused to comment. And they even do that knowing that they're not going to comment. And they know that that's going to make them look bad when they say no comment. And that's why they include it. But the point is they always reach out for comments from the people who are the source of the story. In this case, Facebook. That's the norm. It's the norm if you follow us for any amount of time. If you read articles at all, there's always we reached out for comment, but there was no comment, or they declined to comment, blah, 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 blah. So in this case, Facebook would not decline to comment. We can assure you of that. Facebook would say, just as Michelle said, "Oh, would you like to learn about that? We'd be happy to tell you all about that. Here's some very important information you should probably factor in and consider. Here's our comment. There you go. Here's a comment for you." But they didn't do that. Why didn't they do that? Because the comment would likely neutralize the narrative that they want to craft, which is that Mark Zuckerberg is Hitler reincarnate. So, and here's why I say this. And because I've noticed something over the weekend. There was a story by the San Francisco Chronicle over the weekend. I want to make sure it's the San Francisco Chronicle. I'm 99. Yes. Yes, here it is. San Francisco Chronicle. Here's why. This issue is not specific to this article that we just read. I read an article yesterday from the San Francisco Chronicle where Walgreens in San Francisco is saying we're shutting down 5 Walgreens in San Francisco due to massive theft, which I think many of us have seen videos of people going into Walgreens and stealing shit and walking out. They walk in with big bags. They even walk in with shopping carts, fill up the shopping carts, walk out. I think
$1,200 or less, and California lets you run off scot-free.
so. Walgreens says we're shutting down 5 locations in downtown San Francisco because of just rampant theft. So, it's been fun, but that's a losing proposition for us. And then the mayor and the DA are like, no, 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 you're not shutting down due to theft. We're not inept, idiot politicians. You're shutting down. That's not really why you're shutting down. You're shutting down because, there's not enough business and whatever. Don't blame this on us. This makes us look bad as politicians. And so the San Francisco Chronicle headline was over the weekend, is shoplifting forcing Walgreens to cut back in San Francisco? Data on the closing stores puts the claim into perspective. And then the article says, data released by San Francisco Police Department does not support the explanation announced by Walgreens that it's closing 5 stores because of organized rampant retail theft. One of the stores set to close on Ocean Avenue had only 7 reported shoplifting incidences this year, and a total of 23 since 2018, the data showed. While not all shoplifting incidents are reported to police, the 5 stores slated to close had fewer than 2 recorded shoplifting incidents a month on average since 2018. Now, who here has a big enough brain to figure out the lack of logic being employed by this journalist right here? They even hint at it in the piece I just read at the start of the article.
If you go through the whole article, and particularly if you go towards the end
Don't.
also.
Yeah, of course. I've read the whole
They're not
article 3
reported.
times because I was fuming with rage. And so when San Francisco Chronicle tweeted this article out to Twitter, the manager of the store responds and says, "Hi, I'm the manager of the store. We receive dozens of thefts every hour over the past few years at that store that you're writing about. We stopped reporting those to the police about many years ago when we realized they said, there's no point in reporting these. We're not coming." And then other people in the neighborhood started responding to the same. Can you understand how stupid this article is? That this journalist could have called the manager at that store and said, "Hey, we're going to run a piece here about your stores getting closed, and Walmart's claiming that it's due to shoplifting. Is that the case from your perspective as the manager of the store?" But they didn't do that. They went and hold on. They went and looked at the police data, right, about the number of reported shoplifting. You've only had 2 shopliftings in the past 10 years. The data doesn't here's the headline. Is shoplifting forcing Walgreens to cut back in San Francisco as they claim? Data on the closing stores puts the claim into perspective. Does it really? Does the police data put the claim into any perspective at all? No, not at all, because they're not reporting it to the police. Says here, journalist, there were only 20 jaywalkings in San Francisco in the past 50 years. Are we to conclude these claims that jaywalking happens in San Francisco? I beg to differ. The police department data only shows there was only 20 jaywalkings in the past 200 years.
Only 20 were dumb enough to report them.
Are you that fucking stupid, San Francisco Chronicle? Are you that fucking stupid that immediately after you posted, the manager himself, who you could have fucking called, anyone with half a fucking brain would have called the manager and said, "Hey, your company's saying you're closing due to shopliftings. What's your take as the manager?" Is that what's really happening? That's called journalism, the San Francisco fucking Chronicle. What the fuck is wrong with you? You have a fucking agenda. Stop trying to run with a cockamamie, logic-free agenda. We called the police. We got the police data. Well, that would have been 10 times harder than calling the manager at the fucking Walgreens. What's going on? Why are you having an agenda? You're trying to claim that we think Walgreens is lying. We don't think they're actually leaving. Oh, really? Then why are all of the products all sealed behind plexiglass now? So that's what other people who live right there in that neighborhood who were on Twitter went in and showed photos of the shelves of the Oreo cookies behind locks and keys, behind plastic shields. Why the fuck are they going to that expense and cost if it's not due to fucking shoplifting? Answer, riddle me that, Columbo.
Online shopping is safer.
Gee, I wonder why they're locking up the fucking Oreos.
The next thing is the customers are going to start getting stabbed when they go down there.
The entire store is behind lock and key, plastic shields with keys.
Yeah, they're going to start mugging customers,
You
and that's
think they
going to be
did
the
that
next.
just because? Just for fucking fun?
It's also worth pointing out for those that not from California that California, particularly in San Francisco, their DA won't prosecute minor crimes. So that's the reason that the stores won't even call because they know that they're not going to even prosecute this stuff anymore. So I mean, people basically are walking into stores in California and just taking whatever they want, and just openly shoplifting. It's not just Walgreens,
Oh, I must
particularly in
have done.
San
I
Francisco and
must.
LA.
I must have done my most adventurous of my life, walking from Castro all the way to Embarcadero by myself.
So I'm sorry, but I live here and I'm really having a hard time with the amount of crime that people say is happening when I do these things all the time and I've never felt unsafe in San Francisco. But maybe that's just me.
We're not
But I
talking
do
about
understand that
violent
it's
crime,
happening.
Tino. They're talking about low-level property crimes that are not being prosecuted. So the DA in
Are
San
you
Francisco,
are
he's
you
still going to
selling
prosecute.
Oreos?
No, but
No.
he's
Do
going to
me a
prosecute
favor.
a murder.
Go sell some Oreos down on your make a little Oreo lemonade stand
Yeah. No, I
down
understand.
down
I
down
understand.
and go ahead and do
Yeah.
it in the Tenderloin for me and let's make it really fun.
Yeah. No. I'm just
If you can
yeah.
last more than 10 minutes with your Oreos, I'll give you $1,000.
No, I'm not going to say that selling anything. I understand completely that people selling things in the stores themselves are unsafe. What I guess I'm trying to understand is the connection between being safe in San Francisco and selling things as a retail establishment
Correct.
and whether or not you're safe.
Right. People are not being
There's not a correlation,
right.
I don't think.
Notably there's not a huge uptick in murders and assaults that I'm
Okay,
aware
thank
of.
you.
Yeah.
Okay,
There's
thank you.
I think if I may say, there just seems to be a campaign, almost feels like a campaign to just dump on Silicon Valley and San Francisco and just point out. I mean, any big
And I'm
city
one of
has
those people
areas
that
you
do
don't
that,
go to.
so
Any
I
big
get that.
city, you know what neighborhoods to avoid. And San Francisco is a big city, and so it's got some problems, and of course, in some ways more than others. But to Tina's point, uh, I don't feel unsafe going there, and it's a wonderful city.
But we're not talking about safety. I think that someone's confusing it. I mean,
No, you're
what
not, but
the,
the
no, the issue
implication is unmistakable.
they're talking about basically low-level property crimes impacting retailers, and and this is not just San Francisco; it's Los Angeles too. They have two new, district attorneys who decided that this stuff, these what they consider low-level property crimes, they're just letting people go. Okay, and they also don't want to put people, and it's an issue on both sides. I understand it. They don't want to put poor people in jail for like stealing Oreos, okay, because they can't make a $500 bail. So basically, but it's allowed them to kind of like steal openly. There's some sort of dollar threshold. I forgot what it is now in
That
California.
Chris
Uh,
mentioned.
yeah, that if you stay below a certain dollar value, they just don't bother with it. That has nothing really to do with safety when we're talking about, you're worried about getting assaulted or something. That's a whole different issue. This is just, basically low level property crimes, and Walgreens is apparently closing its stores because they have what in the retail world they call too much shrinkage. Shrinkage basically means inventory just disappearing because people are stealing it.
No, I understand the text of the news. It's just that in succession, it seems like there is an implication a lot more than that, and that's how I interpreted Tina's comment.
So the
But
guy,
I mean, yeah,
he's
there's so many things wrong with San Francisco these days, and it has been, not to put it lightly, but like it's been getting worse for years. How we're going to rectify all those situations, so many people have been trying to figure out. Chessa, whatever, is not
Bowden.
making things easier.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is not making things easier because of the controversies. Um, the mayor's not necessarily making things easier. Some people think she's great, others don't. I think we're just in a really awful time, and San Francisco has not fared very well. Yeah. So, anyways,
So
But Tyler, what I was
uh,
trying to say earlier was not about the article on the Walgreens in the San Francisco Chronicle, but that Wall Street Journal article which we were talking about with Facebook. If you go towards the end, they quote Mr. Rosen even more.
yeah.
So apparently they've done an interview with him for
Yeah,
this.
no, they're saying they show there's even a photo of the interview he did with Frontline in 2018. So I imagine they're referring to the interview that he did with Frontline. And like I said, my apologies.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I haven't done the proper full due diligence on that article. So moving on. The second big topic is as somebody asked before while we were preparing, what to expect from Apple's Unleashed event Monday today. 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pros with mini LED screens, which means, is that like double the resolution, Chris? It's a substantial increase in screen resolution. AirPods 3, a redesigned Mac Mini, and Mac OS Monterey launch. So I think sometime next week, maybe even tomorrow, Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, we'll all be downloading the new version of the
Tyler's
operating
been
system.
really good, Santa. Tyler's been really, really good.
can they make Safari work again? Because that'd be really nice.
There's a similar article from Mark Gurman over at Bloomberg says that a Mac developer says the new MacBook Pro chips will be named M1 Pro and M1 Max. Are appearing in the app logs, according to sources. MacBook Pros will regain MagSafe, it's a little magnetic functionality for your charger, and may lose the touch bar, which I think everybody agrees that would be a good thing. The third biggest article is from the Financial Times. They say they've done analysis that Apple's search ads now account for 58% of iOS app installs from an ad click, up from 17% a year ago. Apple to earn $5 billion from its ad business in 2021. So Apple's definitely start growing their ad business, and they're making it easier. If you want to have your app seen in the App Store. So, for example, somebody searches for a clock app inside of the App Store. I want to know what's the best alarm clock app. Well, if you're an alarm clock app maker, there's the organic results based on the algorithm, which is probably takes into account many things like the reviews. If you have the best reviews, and the price and what have you. Or if you want to jump to the top, you can buy a little ad to be the first. There's an ad widget, so you can have the top listing. It's a paid spot, and people are paying for that spot because they're willing to pay $2 to make $5. That's called business school. So you know your customer acquisition cost to run that ad. You're going to pay $2 to acquire a customer, and you can make $5 from them. Great. Go raise as many millions of dollars as you can to buy as many ads as you can. That's economics 101. So that's going to work really well for Apple. That ad that they're running now is going to make them, at this point, an extra $5 billion for 2021. And you better believe now that they've got their beak wet on the ad market, they're going to go big with this ad thing, Ken.
On ads on what? Which ones?
Inside their app store.
Yeah.
And I imagine they're going to continue to ramp up from there. So it's people are already watching the data point, that the analysis that the Financial Times did, and this headline says Apple search ads, now you know what an Apple search ad is, now account for 58% of Apple app installs. So 50, which from an ad click. So of the times that people installed apps from clicking an ad, it's now gone from 17% a year ago to 58% now. So people are clicking on the ads and downloading apps. It's working. We have good click-through rate, and they're going to optimize that. They're already up to 5 billion. That will probably balloon to 50 billion in the next couple of years. So here comes Apple really getting big into the app ad game. Okay, but we knew
And
that.
also, if I can add something to that, I think it relates to the announcements around user privacy and that the ATT prompt, that transparency prompt that users are supposed to say yes or no to. And I think now it goes to show that it was clearly more of a competitive move rather than actually protecting our users' privacy, because ultimately they're taking the share of install that was going to, I don't know, Twitter, Google, Facebook, and so on. And now it's surely more attributing to their own network. So I think that's even close the loop on that, whether they were doing that to protect users or to grow their ads business.
Yeah, it's all about growing their ad business, of course. So it says iPhone makers' share of mobile app advertising market has tripled in 6 months. Apple's advertising business has more than tripled its market share in the 6 months after it introduced privacy changes to the iPhones that obstructed rivals, including Facebook, from targeting ads at consumers. Right. And now you know why Apple did it, just to Michelle's point, because they didn't claim, oh, we're going to make this privacy change to make more money, which is why they did it. They said they did it for your privacy. We're worried about your privacy. It's all about your privacy. No, you did it because you want to take that money from Facebook. Currently, Facebook was getting that money, and you want that money. That's why you did it. Let's just be fucking real here.
And Tyler, can I ask you a question? If you were the CEO of Apple, would you be that candid, or would you actually say what Apple said? Because that's the way corporations speak.
I understand that. I just unpacking it for the folks who, don't know how the game's played. The in-house business called Search Ads offered sponsored slots in the App Store that appear above search results. Users who search for Snapchat, for example, might see TikTok as the first result on their screen. Branch, which measures the effectiveness of mobile marketing, said Apple's in-house business is now responsible for 58% of all iPhone app downloads that result from clicking an ad. A year ago, it was 17%. Here's a quote. It's like Apple Search. It's like Apple Search Ads has gone from playing in the minor leagues to winning the World Series in the span of half a year, said Alex Bauer, head of product marketing at Branch. Okay. And it, by the way, just immediately started booming right when they changed those privacy settings, which disabled Facebook and really brought in Apple. And there's I'm going to tweet this article out, because if you scroll halfway down towards the end of the article, you'll see a really impressive chart of the share of the marketplace. And boy, is Apple directly eating Facebook's lunch now. You can see it graphically, how the market share has shifted from Facebook was the dominant player even up until April of this year, of 2021. And then sometime around June, Apple started ramping up, and now Apple is by far the dominant, and Facebook is not. So it's dramatically gone from Facebook being the dominant player in that market to Apple being the dominant player in that market. Okay, so the next one is, Bloomberg has internal documents. That's called a leak, folks. That Netflix estimates that Squid Game will create almost $900 million in value for Netflix. 87 million viewers finished the series in the first 23 days. And there was a couple of other, and this, by the way, this leak went to our good friend Lucas Shaw, who at Bloomberg is the
Who by
source. Yeah.
who got a response from Netflix? If you read the article,
Okay.
you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the question is, did Lucas get this data from the same person who gave him the data about the Chappelle Show data?
So I'm going to tell you what's going on because I've been in a lot of calls on this stuff because I'm, okay.
Yep.
So there are people, particularly some of the ones in the union that's about to, that was going to strike and
Yes.
still might strike.
Yep.
Who believe some of these conspiracy theories that have even been bandied about here in our room that that Netflix may have leaked this information, not the whistleblower, but Netflix may have leaked it to Lucas Shaw. Having said that, I will tell you this, that because I'm on his Twitter feed, I'm on a lot of Twitter feeds from people in entertainment. There's a guy who's got like an entertainment blog, for whatever lack of what it's called, some sort of entertainment report, and he asked Lucas on Twitter, I think it was today, he said, he was asking about the Netflix response and whether he got this information actually from Netflix and did Netflix leak it, because there's some people in the union who actually think Netflix leaked this to make themselves look good, like they were going to pound their chest about how good Squid's doing.
Yep.
Which the whole thing's ridiculous. They don't want this analytics out there because they don't want anybody asking for analytics, whether it's actors or anybody else. Okay. And Lucas responded to this guy, why don't you just read the article? It's in there. And apparently the guy didn't read the article very closely. Then he came back. He said, okay, I read the article, and I see that you got a response from Netflix's lawyers that basically Netflix's lawyers said that, we don't think it's appropriate for Bloomberg to report this information that basically is, I don't think they use the word stolen, but, that, this is like proprietary information that we don't want out there, blah, 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 that we try to keep internal.
Mm-hmm.
And this other blogger then responded, okay, so I'll accept that the lawyers said that, but that doesn't mean you didn't call like corporate communications, and corporate communications didn't give you this information. When I spoke to one of the union people today, it was just only a few hours ago, by the way, who initially thought, by the way, that this was like a Netflix corporate leak to make them look good because they're very angry at studios because of these, these studios making all this money and they're going to, all the labor strife there. He finally kind of conceded the point that this probably, because this is my view, it came from some employees, and there's many pissed off employees about this Chappelle thing, that some, whether it was the leaker they fired or some other leaker, that's where I believe it came from. Okay. And I think this, and look, they're going to have supposedly a walkout in 2 days. I mean, they have a number of pissed off employees. And so that's what I think happened. And I think Lucas Shaw, and I've said this before, you might disagree, I think he's just doing his job. He got information, he got a good story, and he ran with it, and that's the end of it.
Yeah. The story says, interestingly, the first line of the story says Netflix estimates that its latest mega hit Squid Game will create almost $900 million in value for the company, according to figures seen by Bloomberg, underscoring the windfall that one mega hit can generate in the streaming era. Okay, who's the source of that? Netflix, because it says Netflix estimates. Okay,
right. It's someone leaked internal documents,
right?
About how they analyze their analytics, and there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. They have this thing called an efficiency ratio, which is essentially a measurement of the investment on a given film or a given movie, which I think is the denominator, and the numerator is the number of viewers. And that's always a question with Netflix, how they measure the number of viewers. And if you've went to the article, you'll see that they measure at different points, but they come up with this efficiency ratio where like 1.0 is apparently like a solid number as they defined it in the article, whatever that means. And that I think, and Squid was like, I don't know, remember 30 or 40, it was like way off the charts of anything they've ever been seen. And Dave Chappelle, not the comedy special that's been controversial that he just did, but the immediately prior comedy special apparently was only a 0.8, and that's really not a factor of viewership. That's a factor of David Chappelle gets paid over $20 million to do one of these shows, and I think it costs the same amount of money to do as a single Dave Chappelle comedy show as it does the 9 shows that they're doing on Squid. So I mean, that's why the efficiency ratio was so high on Squid. And also, by the way, the cost is the cost is obviously relatively lower given the size of the show and the cast. But they had a lot of low priced actors in that show. So.
Mm-hmm. Here's a quote. We think Netflix has found a sound and profitable strategy with its content internalization efforts with Squid Game. A perfect example. Mike Patcher, an analyst at Wedbush, says this is, and its Seinfeld launch. Yep, they don't say what the source of the leak is, but because there was a leak last week about Chappelle's show, the closer. But there we do know who the source of that leak was, and they fired that person. And coincidentally, that person is also the one leading the walkout that's expected to happen around Wednesday or so. And so they fired that person, and that person says, "Oh, I was fired because I'm leading the walkout." And they said, "No, we're firing you because you leaked that information to Lucas Shaw over at Bloomberg," which is quite interesting because she's pregnant. Why is an expecting mother doing something she knows will get her fired? Absolutely, beyond any doubt. She knew she would get fired if that was revealed. Why would she risk that? This is like, there's a whole lot of things you could do, if you, and by the way, she, in theory, stands to gain very little from leaking that. And is risking a lot. Why are you risking a lot for relatively no gain? At a moment when you're about to play a very interesting role in the company of leading a bit of a walkout in a few days. And now there's another leak to the same journalist. Who leaked it? Was it the same leaker?
Tyler, you know that once a journalist is on a story or he covers this company, as we've spoken about, he covers this and all the entertainment companies. It doesn't take a genius to see who's written the last column. So if you're somebody who wants to give a journalist a story, you're going to say, "Oh, who's the byline on the last 20 Netflix stories?"
Yep.
Oh, this guy. So
right.
if you want to get a story, you call him. Yeah.
Well, the way that he positions this story is incredibly pro Netflix. Netflix estimates that its latest mega hit, Squid Game, sounds like you like Netflix when you phrase it that way. Doesn't sound like the Wall Street Journal writing about Facebook.
I think he's reporting facts. They had a very successful movie. It's probably, or whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
It's the most successful one that they've had maybe of all time.
Do you agree there's an interesting difference in tonality between how Lucas is writing about Netflix versus how our friend Jeffrey's writing about Facebook?
Yeah, because the underlying whole thing is different. I mean,
and by the way, I noticed there is a quote directly from Netflix in this. So he did reach out to Netflix for an actual quote, and he got the quote.
That, yeah.
Right, yeah, from the attorney. And the attorney says it would be inappropriate for Netflix to disclose these numbers, and we take great care to kind of keep this shit private. Oh, you mean you actually reached out? You got the document. You got the internal document. You saw what it said. You were going to write an article about it, and you actually called them to say, "Hey, I got this document. I'm going to run it. We would like a comment from you. Would you like to comment before we run it?" Oh, you did that thing called journalism? Oh, you did do that? Oh, Lucas Shaw, let me give you the clap, my friend. You did journalism. You're a journalist. Good job. Way to go, Lucas Shaw, doing that journalism thing over there at Bloomberg. That's called journalism. Because this is not an agenda. Very interesting. See, you notice the difference?
Yes.
I'm not speaking to you, Ken. I'm speaking to myself metaphorically. But it's an interesting difference in posture that Lucas has with Netflix and Jeffrey has with Facebook. But yeah, with their latest mega hit, Squid Game, will create nine. It's just a very, at no point do they mention anything negative. It's a whole lot of positive. He goes a little above and beyond on the positivity in his word selection in this piece, and in a way that I don't think Netflix minds. Would be my guess.
I will tell you why Netflix doesn't want these numbers
You
out.
have a great argument.
Okay?
I love your argument for why they don't like it. You have the best argument ever for why they
Yeah.
actually probably hate this.
Okay, so right, which is everybody in who's talent in Hollywood is talking about the changing economics and the not getting a back end and all of this. Even though they're getting more of a front end, somehow these people can't do math. A lot of them are better off with the higher front end than the back end because there may not even be a back end, most of the time. But leaving that aside, it's an issue with the actors, the directors, the screenwriters, and now even the below the line people. I mean, I just did a call tonight with a lot of these union members, and they're, who claim that they're going to vote against this deal that, IATSE just, negotiated with their leadership just negotiated with the studios because it doesn't deal with like pension contributions. And I'm not going to get into the weeds on this pension thing because I got into the weeds over there, but it doesn't, this is not the room for it. But
Can you give us a summary on what to? Because they're expecting to make a decision if they're going to have a full-on Hollywood strike this week.
they're not going to vote. They probably won't vote on this for the next 30 or 60 days. So there will not be a strike probably in the next 30 or 60 days. But it has to go to a vote of the membership. Okay. And so what the members, at least that were on this, it was a clubhouse call, by the way. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That was on this clubhouse call just earlier tonight. And I'm not saying, I don't know if they're reflective of the overall membership. They claim they are. Okay. Because they said they've spoken to. Okay. They said they're going to vote no because they don't think the deal is good enough. And like one of the things that I brought up, I don't even want to get into the weeds on pension accounting, okay, because this is not
Yeah.
the room for it. So, okay, but yeah. But a lot of them are just very angry, and I understand some of it. I mean, they dealt with some of their key issues, which is they're going to get breaks on weekends because they were treated, pretty terribly, quite frankly. Okay, but all they see is these companies are making like a lot of money. I think the studios, quite frankly, took a much harder stance than they should have, because politically it was untenable given their stock prices where they are and their profits. Just it doesn't play well. So I actually think the union got a lot. Maybe they didn't get everything they wanted, but So yeah, that was basically the summation of it. But there won't be a strike in the next 30 or 60 days because they have to vote on it. And if they vote it down, what they alluded to is that they might vote it down, hoping that this is like maybe like the first part of a larger negotiation. They'll vote it down, and they think they'll get a better deal. Who knows? This deal almost didn't come to fruition. It was like 24 at the 24th hour.
So check this out. So I just found something kind of interesting. Lucas wrote the article, as we've been discussing. Kim Masters, who's at the Hollywood Reporter, tweeted Lucas's article because they're friends. They both cover Hollywood as Hollywood journalists. And Kim from the Hollywood Reporter, also a very substantial Hollywood publication, says in her tweet that Netflix, I'm tweeting her tweet out right now so you can see it. It says Netflix ... quote unquote, look over there, meaning it's this headline that Lucas is running is from Netflix trying to distract you from the what Ken is talking about, which is this upcoming strike, that this is a diversion tactic. And then Lucas responds to Kim from the Hollywood Reporter on Twitter on her tweet by saying, not exactly ...
Yeah, because it was reported over the weekend or Friday, whatever, at least the broad headlines across all the papers, was that there was a deal reached between the union negotiating committee and the studio executives. It still has to go for a vote, but that averted an immediate strike. So I mean, you'd have to sit there and look at the timing. When did this article come? If you want to believe all of that, when did the article come out? When did they announce they had a tentative deal? I don't think the Netflix article. I don't think Lucas's article at all has any relationship to the strike. I just don't. I mean,
I got you.
and some of the stuff that's like one of these union members who was very upset, at least earlier tonight. I mean, he's just like he just looks at the studios as these big corporations making all of this money, and and their deals really don't take into account streaming and the industry changes and all of that, and that's what they're complaining about. And their pension's supposed to be funded with residuals, and now there's going to be less residual. I mean, all of this stuff.
How
But
Here's a question: how much would it? To me, one of the interesting issues here is that I think Squid Game is so successful. I just binged watched it over the weekend myself, and I certainly agree it's worth the watch. And um, it is quite brilliant. And just like that, what was that Korean movie that won Best Picture from the Oscars a couple years ago?
Parasite.
Parasite.
Site. There's something similar about them where it's got this kind of quirky, futuristic, dystopian vibe that really resonates with people that Hollywood is not doing. It's it
Well,
has a right that they
yeah.
both have that similar element to them of this kind of like the haves versus the have-nots.
Yeah, and
And
there's an article in one of the major papers today, Tyler,
yeah,
that said, particularly in Korea, and I don't. I mean, I'm just repeating what's in the articles. Don't know Korea that well, but they're saying that there are these tremendous issues about the have and haves nots, and about people being very upset. Not all that dissimilar from the United States, but
right.
maybe even more heightened in Korea than it is here,
Yeah.
and so it kind of plays, both those movies played into that.
Yeah. But it's just it's a really very nice piece of work of art and commenting on uh, you know modern uh, life. It's just what a really beautiful piece of content that, and both of those both being widely celebrated and rightfully so, and just remarkably un-Hollywood. There's a real I can't see there's a freshness to it. There's a whole new smell and taste to it that is obviously foreign, but in a great way. Like the first time you ever have amazing Korean food, and you're like, "Holy shit! I did not realize that this stuff existed. This is amazing," and it's kind of
And it's not
undeniable,
French.
huh?
Tyler, do you remember? You remember when? By the way, I also just wound up watching it over the weekend finally and finishing it and seeing it, and I thought it was fantastic. There were so many messages in the film. And do you remember when I told you that here in Turkey, many of the Turkish series take their original concept and storyline from Korea,
Sure.
and literally from Korean series, and then they'll kind of make it for the Turkish audience, and they'll extend it if it's something that they like. They'll just go ahead and continue writing it from their own format. But and that also just shows you that a lot of the Turkish series are now being shown entirely in the Middle Eastern market. I mean, the Iranians, the Arab markets, and the Mid East, and then also in the Latin American markets are huge now on licensing these Turkish series. So in essence, it's I think I think Korean series and the film lines, the concepts are fantastic, and it's also just shows that there's so much, culturally, there's so much in common with a lot of these people are just feeling across the world. And I was waiting to speak to people now that you brought this up. I mean, it's not a film room, but what did you think about the way that they were showing the English speakers, the Americans and the foreigners? I mean, I just like they just showed them as a bunch of goofball, just one-minded. I mean, it was just such an image that they were trying to portray about these, the typical Americans.
I
And there
I
was,
didn't.
I don't know, it was just
I'll
so.
give you my take as an American, and you're speaking of the VIPs, obviously, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. I thought it was more of a. They were more addressing I don't think it was American that they were trying to target. I think they were trying to target wealthy capitalists per se, more specifically. And I got to tell you, I've been at many dinners with many of those the people they're trying to portray. Their conversation styles was pretty fucking on. I was laughing when I was watching those scenes, like kind of shaking my head and a kind of like, holy shit, like this guy did his homework. Like that's what those conversations are kind of like.
It was just painful to watch.
It is painful, but it was painful in a like, oh boy, this. Uh,
Yikes.
that they
So
he
I have a question. Oh, go
yeah
ahead, Tyler. Go
yeah
ahead. No. Go ahead. Sorry, I
yeah.
didn't
I
mean to
just
interrupt.
I've that part uh, struck a chord with me as well in an interesting way. But because I've been in not in such a dystopian scenario as as they have laid out in those scenes, but dinners with the people that they're kind of trying to characterize or stereotype, and there's an element of truth that they're capturing in that. That's kind of
And it was a yikes moment, but yeah, it
yeah,
was.
it is a yikes moment. Anyway,
So I have a question and a comment. Well, so I'll start with the notion that I have not seen it because I don't always do well with creepy films. And there was an article in last week's Bangkok Post in which the Thai government warned people not to watch it because they may be left feeling unsettled after watching it. So as I'm listening to you all, I'm wondering whether there were themes that perhaps certain government leaders, not only in Thailand but in other places, might feel uneasy about. But
oof,
and it's really quite interesting when we talk about the haves and the have nots. And I haven't looked at any recent data, but Thailand has one of and historically, just based on my memory, Thailand has one of the most unequal societies. And I think
the
about
most, yeah.
yeah. I think about, I have friends at both ends of the spectrum, people that are very well connected and related to the people that we don't mention, and then people that live on dirt floors,
Yeah.
so I think it's really interesting. I mean, it caught my attention when I saw the article headline. I didn't read it, but I thought, okay, well, this is probably not something that I would want to watch because I don't like feeling creeped out. But as I listen to you all, I wonder whether there are certain other themes, particularly given the movements that are happening in places like Thailand against, this extreme disparity in terms of wealth and power.
Yeah, your average Thai person is going to resonate with the main character, and on a deeper level than your average Westerner is going to.
But this is way
Interesting.
more.
I have not
Isn't this
watched
way
it, but
too Hunger Gamesy?
sorry. Okay, can I say
Isn't
something
this?
first?
Please go ahead.
Thank you. I have not watched it, but with regards to the have and have nots, the definition of what is good to have and what is not
Yeah.
too good to have. Tyler, I think you have a different take in your recent podcast to your friend. The domesticated people, they do
No,
not know that the open sea is actually a supermarket for those people who.
that's not totally relevant to the topic here at the moment.
Yeah,
The
but
Shahin,
I'm just saying, because all this definition is by the current society now in this
yeah,
capitalistic world, but
yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's totally
Thais have quite a bit of debt, and this movie's about people in debt and what they have to go through, and Thais go through a lot. And this Squid Game is, I think, more relevant to Thais than any of my Western friends who will watch this. The Thais are gonna resonate with this on a much stronger, deeper level than because and the way that the hired kind of quote unquote police role in this is also kind of relevant in Thai society in a way that it's not in the West, and the VIPs are relevant they actually exist in Thai society in a way that they don't quite in the same aggressive ways, especially the sexualized scene is so relevant to Thailand in a way that isn't relevant to the West. And it's like, oh God, like Thais is right that there's a reason why the Bangkok Post wrote that article, because this piece, we call it a movie because it feels like a movie when you're watching it. It's so well done that it transcends TV in a sense. So it's like, it's this is going to hit Thais much harder than, and I would even say Southeast Asians than your average Western audience viewer. Sorry.
So to that point,
Yeah.
Tyler,
Yeah.
so I pulled up an article, and so General Krishna Patanacharan, who is the deputy spokesperson for the Royal Thai Police,
Yeah.
issued a warning for
Yep.
children not to watch this film. And so I mean, yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on. I mean, I guess I'm speaking from the point of someone who's not watched it,
Yep.
but now it makes so much sense. I mean, you have the Royal Thai Police say, no,
Yeah.
kiddos, don't watch this. This is not a good thing.
Yep.
You don't want to emulate or imitate what you see going on in this bad film, you know? And so I do think that it's really interesting. And my comment that I was going to make earlier is, you know, when you said that this was so not Hollywood, I think that what Netflix and platforms like Netflix have done is that they have exposed broader audiences to diverse film genres, whereas before you'd have to go to an indie, you know, movie theater, or, you know, to be able to catch something that's not necessarily mainstream. And I've watched so many Nollywood films and things that I'd never seen before, you know, because they are more accessible. And so I think from a platform perspective, it really does provide more access and more insights to different types of film genre and entertainment.
Yeah. It's not a coincidence that the Thai authorities are saying don't watch this. That's how relevant it is, in a deep, spot on, hammer on nails. Like, oh my God, is this gonna resonate with Thais on such a stronger level that it worries the powers that be. Shahin, you were chiming in.
I was just going to say that this is too much like Hunger Games, and
Oh,
if you don't like
yes,
that genre, it's
yes,
just not
yeah. It's Hunger Games
it's
for
not pleasant.
adults, right? So
Yeah, it's just very unpleasant.
yes.
That's all.
So by the way, so let's not forget that the Thais, when they're doing their protests, when they're protesting in Bangkok, they hold up the 3-finger Hunger Games salute,
Oh, Katniss.
just to give you an idea of just how spot on this all is. Because the Thais already use the Hunger Games as representative of their, you know, how they feel society is shaped. And this movie is going to be 10 times more accurate to what they're going through than the Hunger Games. And they're already using the Hunger Games 3-finger salute. So now you understand why the authorities are a little concerned with how this could unravel.
Yeah.
That's why I said it's just such a great piece on society. And it's like, fuck. And sorely missing from the Hollywood kind of catalog of content at the moment, and that's why it's the world's most successful piece of content at the moment. It's brilliant. It's really it's art, and that's why everyone's talking about it. It's like the best kind of art.
They're already filming season 2, I heard.
No,
So season 2 is on its way.
I don't think that's true. I just read an interview with by the way, the director is also the writer, Solo. And what an incredible marathon of an achievement to write and direct this singularly. And that means you're getting the artist's true vision here. When the writer is the director, singularly, holy shit. And read the interviews of the creator, writer, director, who went through. He wrote it 10 years ago. That's the interesting bit. And great interviews that he's able to give on this, because he was going through very similar struggling. He wrote this because he wanted something like this to exist when he was struggling 10 years ago when he wrote it. That's why he wrote it. And I wish I had known that when I watched it. It's yeah, and you can feel it. I mean, they really capture the struggle. Mike, and then let's just pause to just recognize, like, Koreans have, with this, I mean, the Parasite gave the world a glimpse, but this really drives home what the Japanese and the Chinese and Asians have known. Like, the Koreans are just the content drama, you know, you know, kill,
Drama fever.
killing it,
Backed by the government.
killing
The
it.
entertainment is backed by the government.
Well, you know,
Amazing.
one thought that went through my mind is, being from Hollywood. Imagine this movie comes out. When this game comes out, I mean, this movie, this series came out, and it's the blockbuster series of the planet at the moment, and it should be, for all the reasons we're discussing. But it's Korean. I mean, it's unapologetically Korean and lovely in that way, and I love that it is. And you know, you get exposed to some aspects of Korean society that you wouldn't normally if you haven't never traveled there. And you know, you learn about what Squid Game is, and you learn, you know, Korean, you know, element, some kind of aspects of, you know, going to a kombini and eating, you know, kind of Korean kombini food, and you know, there's. My point is, imagine if for the next 100 years, because Hollywood has been around for about 100 years, if there was nonstop, all the top movies, all the top Netflix series were all Korean all the time for 100 years. And imagine how that would shape global culture in the way that Hollywood has. And then you realize, holy shit, wow, America and Hollywood has played an incredible political role globally, geopolitically, based on the fact that Hollywood has been the dominant content for about 100 years. So, yeah, and kudos to Korea for finally getting their time in the spotlight. And they, as Asians have known for a decade, they just their drama. That's what their real specialty. I mean, comedy isn't really their strong suit, but boy, do they kill it on the drama. Oh my god!
And don't forget about BTS. They've got the biggest
Yeah,
Big
that
selling
too.
TikTok,
boy
yeah.
band
Yeah,
Even
in the
their
world.
music,
yeah,
I was
Korean
just gonna say
Korean
the
bands
music
and
too.
music.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean,
And
there's
don't
been
think for a minute
rain.
that Hollywood is not paying attention to who their audiences are and what kind of stuff is resonating with them. Not just Hollywood, the music industry.
Yeah.
You know, that they're no longer just they're not just catering to the Kardashian audiences.
Okay. Anyone else with a hot take on Squid Game?
Well, well, that's what I mean. What Netta mentioned is exactly what you've been saying, Tyler. Is that as we, you know, in the United States, as media got kind of lazy and embraced the low cost, you know, low
Yeah,
writing over low cognitive overload of the low cognitive load of reality TV. It allowed others to pop into place and come up with compelling content. You know, I mean, my mom and wife have been addicted to Korean dramas since, you know, for
yeah,
like the last 15 years,
yeah,
you know, and all of them are just streamed over weird services you've never heard of. And now it's finally come to Netflix in a major way. So,
yeah.
yep.
It's also something, Tyler, you know, it's really fascinating. Hey, what's up, Trader Joe, Chris? It's it's really fascinating as well, because when you look at Flushing, for example, in Queens, and you look at K-Town in LA and K-Town in New York City, you know, K-Town's been around there for a while. Let's say about 20 years, Tyler, 25 years. There's been a tremendous amount of Koreans living in the US as well. I think similar to what Chris is saying, you're going to have a lot of there's getting also a lot of attention because they're able to watch this through a normal means now, Chris, right? They don't have to stream it and worry about it cutting out. And I empathize with what you're sharing because it's very similar in the Latin culture with telenovelas. You know, we watch them through every outlet
Exactly.
imaginable. And and it's really fascinating because we go out of our way to find them. But it's really interesting to see how like they're actually bringing it forward. And it's literally, if I Google Squid Game, there's at least 10 news things about this Squid Game like series. You know, I mean, like, it's crazy. It's literally taking the world by storm. It's not even just one or two countries, it's like everywhere. And Tyler, isn't it also a take on red light, green light, the childhood game we all used to play, some of us used to
That's
play?
one of the games in the series. Yeah.
And I don't want to give any spoilers, of course, so I'm going to shut up now, but yeah. It's a pretty interesting
Yeah, that's
series for sure.
the first episode, and after you can't watch the first episode and not binge watch it. It's that
I
is
know, I know. That's why I said I'm gonna, not gonna be a spoiler.
be careful because that first episode is so brilliantly
And
done
it
that
is. It was. I must admit, it was pretty badass. I
So
mean, yeah,
so
Binge
Breaking Bad
City.
or this, and I know it's a different time.
well, here's the
What
interesting point
what did
is
you bring back, Chris? What was that?
yeah,
Breaking Bad,
Oh yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
how
Totally,
addicting
totally.
that show was too.
Yep, yep, yep.
I tried to watch the first episode of Breaking Bad and didn't get past the first episode, and with this one I watched the first one and then had to binge the whole thing. So
Correct.
the there's all just to introduce an interesting thought here, that this have not phenomena, which is not uniquely American at all, clearly, and even more representative in, like we were discussing, in Thai society. Statistically, the biggest gap of wealth is actually statistically in Thailand, where the top 1% control about 99% of the economy. So, where in America, it's the top 1% control somewhere in the 50, 60, 70% of the economy. So, for example, so interesting that to make content about this in America would actually be uniquely more challenging because of the racial diversity in America. You would have it would turn into a racial political discussion if you tried to, based on the characters who are the players in the game, right? So no matter what, if you regardless of who you picked as the players in the game in the US, that would turn into a racial political discussion. In Korea, it's not. They're just all Koreans. And it doesn't matter. There's the haves and the have-nots. Is not a racial issue in Squid Game. Interesting, they do have one North Korean character, and that's interesting in itself, actually, how they brought that in, and that's their version of diversity in a sense, and how they address it, and which is really interestingly done in Squid Game. Anyway, but is that perhaps why there's a notable lack of uh, addressing one of the biggest social, civil society issues happening globally and in America as well? Why is American content notably lacking what is obviously so successful with Parasite and Squid Game? This huge, the biggest issue of our
Right.
age, of this, wealth in inequality. Am I?
Tyler, this is not, well, for some of us, like maybe Chris and a few of us others here that are coming from, as well as yourself, Tyler, having grown up in areas where you've grown up with multicultures, right?
Yep.
You clearly know that Hollywood has a disdain in some ways for even presenting and uplifting African American artists, Latino artists, Asian artists. You know that this has been a big thing with the academies, and you're clearly seeing that the rise of those demographics in talent are just going towards the paths where they're being acknowledged for their gifts. And I think the Academy Awards is kind of, in some ways, that they're going to hurt themselves as well, because they're, look how long it's taken for an African American woman to win an award. Look at how long it's taken for a Latino or Latina to win an award. Look how long it's taken for an Asian to win an award. But the reality is, the United States is such a multicultural country that and they're the largest population, having studied in my MBA in the United States, will be Latino. By the time it hits 2030, will be majority of the population of the US will be Hispanic, half the population of that. So you're going to start to see numbers where people are having kids and expanding. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Korean as well in the United States, and the Vietnamese, some of the other Korean, other Asian cultures as well, will come up in population in the U.S. as well, because the U.S. is becoming super, super more multidimensional and more multicultural. But it's also something from a perspective of who's having kids. It's not your normal Americans, it's your immigrants, it's your mixed families. They're the ones that are really still having children because their family values are almost still intact as well. And I think that's sort of the interplay of how some organizations in terms of entertainment, like Netflix, is going to supersede those other organizations, like maybe Disney or maybe Warner. This is kind of how I see it, having worked for Fox Sports and Fox News and Murdoch and stuff. So it's very interesting.
Yep. Okay, next up is from the Wall Street Journal. Some doctors in the US and other countries say that TikTok videos about Tourette's syndrome may be contributing to a rise in cases of teen girls with Tourette's syndrome or physical tics. Here it is. Where'd it go? There it is. When teens started turning up in doctors' offices with sudden severe physical tics, specialists suspected social media. The girls had been watching Tourette's syndrome TikTok videos. Teenage girls across the globe have been showing up in doctors' offices with tics, physical jerking movements, and verbal outbursts since the start of the pandemic. Movement disorder doctors were stumped at first. Girls with tics are rare, and these teens had an unusually high number of them, which had developed suddenly after months of studying the patients and consulting with one another. Experts at top pediatric hospitals in the US, Canada, Australia, and UK, that's worth noting. Make note of those countries. US, Canada, Australia, UK. Discovered that most of the girls had something in common. TikTok. So why interesting where it's happening there? TikTok is rather global. Why are the girls in those countries developing these facial tics and outbursts and what they call Tourette syndrome? So why are those TikTok users being exposed to this and not young ladies elsewhere? According to a spate of recent medical journal articles, doctors say the girls had been watching videos of TikTok influencers who said they had Tourette syndrome, a nervous system disorder that causes people to make repetitive involuntary movements or sounds. No one has tracked these cases nationally, but pediatric movement disorder centers across the U.S. are reporting an influx of teen girls with similar tics. Donald Gilbert, a neurologist in Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center who specializes in pediatric movement disorders and Tourette syndrome, has seen about 10 new teens with tics a month since March 2020. So over the past year and a half. In Cincinnati. Before the pandemic, his clinic had seen at most one a month. Specialists at other major institutions have also reported similar surges since March 2020. Texas Children's Hospital has reported seeing approximately 60 teens with tics, whereas doctors there saw 1 or 2 cases a year before the pandemic. At Johns Hopkins University Tourette Center, 10% to 20% of pediatric patients have described acute onset tic-like behaviors, up from 2 to 3% a year before. According to Joseph McGuire, an associate professor, in Chicago, said it saw 20 patients with it, up from 10 from the full year before. Oh, in June this year, they're seeing more in June than the full year before, twice as much, 20 for June versus 10 for the full year before. Doctors say most teens have previously diagnosed anxiety or depression that was brought on or exacerbated by the pandemic. There's plenty of tic-like behaviors to witness on TikTok. So really, the article goes on and on. It does profiles of many of these young ladies.
So, Tyler, you want a conspiracy theory here that may make sense?
Go
Because I
ahead.
believe all the countries that you just ticked off,
Yep.
no pun intended,
Yep.
were members of what we call the Five Eyes, which
Yep.
is a defense alliance of
Correct.
English-speaking countries from World War II,
Correct.
and then TikTok owned by the Chinese company.
Correct.
So that one you could play a conspiracy theory on.
Yes, I was thinking
Yeah.
the same.
So I have to ask. When we were growing up, we talked a lot about the dangers of subliminal programming, but we have, you know, the ability to broadcast a video that can be tampered with all the time. Like, does anybody think that there's any kind of subliminal programming or other avenues that need to be really investigated? I mean, if they were doing this in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, imagine what they're doing with algorithms right now.
Well, by the
And that's
way,
the conspiracy
here
theory
I
in me.
can add into this conspiracy theory a little bit. There was a headline a couple months ago that in the Chinese version of TikTok called Douyin, they had banned unattractive, disabled, or overweight people from being seen in TikTok. They want very professionally dressed, very well spoken, very attractive people in the Chinese version of TikTok. So I don't think people with Tourette's would even be allowed in the Chinese version of
Yeah.
TikTok.
Hey,
So
Tyler, if I could just very quickly just take one step back for just 2 seconds, just to
yeah,
let you know, because I had seen this article. I didn't bother to tweet it out until we just had discussed it for such an extensive period of time because I really didn't consider it technology. But the Los Angeles Times ran a big story, which I tweeted to Tech News, and so people can see it, or you can look at it on my Twitter feed. But it's from the LA Times, and the headline is, and it's a big article there. The seedy world of private lending and Squid Game is a real temptation. The popularity of Squid Game is inseparable from South Korea's very real crisis of mounting household debt, gapping inequality, and a weak whatever. I haven't even finished it, but basically what we were talking about is a major story in the LA Times.
yeah. So here's the article from The Guardian. TikTok tried to filter out videos from ugly, poor, or disabled users.
Hey, Tyler,
Yes.
and that's when all the filters took off.
Even chubby. TikTok's moderators were instructed to exclude videos if they failed any of the number of categories the document shows. Users with an abnormal body shape, either dwarf or acromegaly, who are chubby, obese, or too thin, or who have ugly facial looks or facial deformities, should be removed, one document says. Since if the character's appearance is not good, the video will be much less attractive, not worthy to be recommended to new users. Yet there's a weird Tourette's syndrome happening in just the Five Eyes countries, and that's kind of interesting. What's going on, TikTok? Okay, so the next article, shall we, is Wall Street Journal, a look at YouTube's in-house creator partnerships team, started by my buddy George Strombolis, who was my account manager as the first paid content creator. George left YouTube when he realized, oh, this is going to be big, because he was handling the very first paid content creators at YouTube. And then he started Fullscreen to create kind of a full service agency for the content creators. So this article is a look at the in-house creator partnerships team, which has over 1,000 employees across 45 countries, offering advice and guidance to about 12,000 creators. The site has spent more than a decade building an in-house agency for digital superstars, drawing ad sales, sponsorships, and other revenue. So now you've got 1,000 account managers for the top YouTube content creators. About the top 12,000. So they handle about 12 content creators each and have them work with brands and do all kinds of partnerships, all good stuff. Yep.
Tyler, can I say something a little off on some news that I just got this morning?
Sure.
That apparently they just banned Clubhouse. My sister
Who?
just sent me a message. Iran just banned
Oh,
Clubhouse, and they were extremely, extremely active here. And
yes.
just coincidentally, I was checking. You've seen some of the rooms have up to thousands of people per each room on different discussions. And actually, I just checked, and plenty of them are still on, obviously using VPNs and stuff. But they were everybody, even from within the government, a lot of people were on and opening up rooms and having all sorts of discussions, which I thought was good because they were putting people together in the same room that normally would never ever come together and discuss things. But as of this morning, she just told me that she's in the audience right now. She told me that they just banned it.
Yeah. You're right that the Persians were particularly very active in Clubhouse. Thais are as well, Burmese as well. These countries, and boy, is it an incredibly powerful platform for people in countries that have kind of dictatorish type governments to talk. Holy cow. And you will see me in the Burmese rooms talking with
And
the Burmese folks, and yeah.
early in my clubhouse experience, circa February, March, um, we heard stories that like Iranian agents would follow certain people that spoke negatively about Iranians around Clubhouse. And so that was the thing I did observe personally too. I did see some rooms where you'd be speaking with somebody, and then all of a sudden the stage would kind of get flooded with people trying to disrupt the stage to shut down the room. So
But Chris, they've been doing this for so many years that the people are experts at self-censoring and knowing how to deal with that. At the same time, it's just, that's just Tuesday as far as they're concerned.
yeah,
Okay, the next one is from the Wall Street Journal, how the tech used to make giant ultra high precision mirrors and lenses for the James Webb Space Telescope were repurposed to develop displays for mobile devices. I think we can skip that one. The next one's from the Financial Times. 9 UK schools to start taking payments for lunches by scanning students' faces, claiming that the system speeds up queues and is more COVID safe. So you walk through the lunchroom at these 9 UK schools and you pay with your face, just like Russia proudly announced Friday that their entire metro system through Russia is now face pay. So now every Russian citizen is keenly aware that their face is being tracked and where they're going and what they're purchasing with their face. And now it's coming to
What are
the
they
K
doing?
schools.
What are they doing those bad winters when maybe your face is covered up a lot with just to prevent the cold?
I'm not sure. So the next one is there was an interview of Michael Dell of his new book called Play Nice But Win, where he battles Carl Icahn before taking Dell private and his friendship with Steve Jobs and more. Wall Street Journal says they've done analysis that the median CEO pay of the U.S. tech startups that went public in 2020 was $21.9 million. 7 of the 10 best paid CEOs of U.S. public companies were from such startups. And
I'm in the wrong business, Tyler.
my buddy Jason took to Twitter about this article to say, dear investors, if you don't like the CEO's comp or their salary, how much they're being compensated, or the company's performance, don't buy the stock. It's really that simple. You get what you pay for. CEOs know that if they overpay themselves and the stock doesn't perform, that A, investors run for the hills, and B, you get fired. And the next one, it's a bunch of funding announcements. A look at from Raya, a secretive subscription-based social network with a rigorous user selection process and a rigid code of silence for accepted members. So this is like the Fight Club of the internet. Is anyone a member of Raya? Raya. The Raya and the promise of a private social media. The app has created a space for free of the problems that plague the rest of the web, but only by leaving almost everybody out, according to the New Yorker. A comedian and writer in Los Angeles was pursuing Raya, a private social app, when she matched with someone claiming to be Ben Affleck. He messaged her first and then chatted for a bit, but then the person named Jay grew skeptical. He was writing like a lot, and I thought, there's no way that's really him, she told me recently. She sent a message accusing the person of being a fake, then unmatched with the account, cutting off contact. Soon enough, though, she received a message from Affleck's verified Instagram account, which has more than 5 million followers. Why did you unmatch me? It's me, Ben Affleck. Affleck said in a private phone video shot in close-up, and Jay turned a clip from that message into a TikTok meme about embarrassing personal moments. I didn't put out the whole conversation. There are many more videos from him. The clip immediately made headlines around the UK that the woman rejected Ben Affleck. And that starts the first paragraph about this
I
private.
wonder how J Lo feels about that.
But yeah, I think there's a strong desire for people who don't want to be with the wide open public. There's private clubs are booming around Japan, as always, pioneered this as usual. There have always been a decade ahead on these things, and now the rest of the world's starting to feel the same. This wanting to be more exclusive, an exclusive social network. And Clubhouse did have that originally. And you had an incredibly high caliber of users.
And then they let me in, Tyler,
And
and then it
then
all went down
and then
from
it
there.
turned into a big Greyhound bus stop. Yeah.
And Romper Room at the same time.
It turned into Romper Room. Yeah, it's an interesting phenomena of having open
I
versus
think,
closed spaces.
Tyler,
Yeah.
I feel like Clubhouse was a huge social experiment, don't you think?
Well, as I mentioned, Jason and I were we had a product which was sort of the Clubhouse of its day in 2007, which was a question and answer platform before Quora, predating Quora, which came out around 2010. And we had everybody, all the best Clubhouse users that were using Clubhouse in the first year were also them and more. We had Elon Musk and everybody were in our question and answer private Q&A site where people were asking and answering questions. And you had Elon asking questions and answering questions, and all the top investors and all the top entrepreneurs and artists and everybody. It was like Clubhouse, but without audio. It was just people asking and answering questions. And it was great. We thought, holy shit, this is the future, everybody. We did it. We figured out the future. This is amazing. And then we opened it up, and then everybody came in, and oh my God, the questions went from, the average interaction went from awesome to utter crap instantly. The answers became idiotic, and the questions even more so. And it just flooded the whole site, and it was like it literally died in a day, in 24 hours. And so I had said this from Clubhouse from the very beginning, when it was fantastic, when I first came in, and it was still quite fantastic and it was lovely. And I was like, oh yeah, I know where this is going to go. The second they open this, it's going to turn into dog shit overnight. And that Cal will remember, Cheryl might remember me predicting that. And you just have to be very, very, very careful with opening up a closed social network into an open social network, because that phenomena will happen. So how to address that? Twitter's managed to sort of address it, because over the years, it slowly, it was based, the interactions are based on who you follow. So there's you're not exposed to a lot of stuff you don't want to be exposed to. So it's a tricky thing to deal with, but it doesn't surprise me at all that private clubs, physical clubs, and private social networks are going to start coming into play. That's going to be a huge space. You're also,
Tyler,
yeah.
don't you also, well, what are your thoughts in terms of this whole pandemic? Because it's super fascinating that you've said that, because I think this is also being driven by this whole sort of restriction that we've had, and fear that even when I see people coming out now, they're really actually super grateful that if they're going back into their training routine, or they're going back into their yoga or their fitness routine, they're actually really grateful for the smaller spaces and the more curated experience, as opposed to being shoved in a room with like 15 other people all sweating and sort of doing downward facing dog at the same time, and not having that sort of freedom to feel like your personal space is respected. Do you feel that people post-pandemic are leaning more to that as well because they want to have their space be regarded.
Yep. I think people want to be more private and they want to be more intimate. They're craving intimacy, and they're craving intimacy and a lot of what we're doing here, which is a more niche network, which you're able to do in Clubhouse, thankfully, which is people organized by tribes. And for example, my Fish Brain, which is a social network for people who fish, and that's the ultimate fisherman's and fisherwoman's social network. And you're starting to see social networks for all kinds of different niches. So that's happening simultaneously. Okay.
Tyler, there's a creepy, eerie piece of news. It's from last week, but I don't know if you got to cover it, but it's very, some ways, eerie. I could just read the title and then I'll tweet it out, and you can see if you want to dive into it at any point in time. But it says, who bought 1.6 billion in Bitcoin Wednesday and why? It's an eerie coincidence that a trade of this size happened on exchanges with ties to Chinese customers during a week beset by the country's capital market woes. Very interesting. I'm going
Okay.
to tweet it out.
But back to the article we just read. Oh, we did the UK school facial recognition thing. A look at U.S. cyber games, jointly founded in April by the U.S. government, academia, and the private sector to find and train candidates for cybersecurity careers. And that's pretty much that's your big stories today, Monday, October 18th. So we get to get into the fun tweets that everyone's been tweeting in here, like this one from CSQ. Sends in this one from the New York Times. Why NASA is launching a robotic archaeologist named Lucy. In a vast odyssey across the solar system, the mission will simply study asteroids known as Trojans that may contain secrets of how the planets ended up in their current configuration. That's very cool. And then somebody sent in this one. PT Yoder sends in this one from the Financial Times. They say they have an exclusive that China tested a nuclear-capable hypersonic missile in August that circled the globe at hypersonic speeds before speeding towards its target, demonstrating an advanced space capability that caught U.S. intelligence by surprise. And then the next one is from Evan from NPR. The headline reads, why the Salesforce CEO wants to redefine capitalism by pushing for social change. And it says Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff. Where to go? When Texas enacted the controversial ban on most abortions in September, Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff sent a message to his staff in Texas, punctuated with a heart emoji. Ohana, if you want to move, we'll help you exit Texas. Your choice, Benioff wrote in a tweet using the Hawaiian word for family. And so he's telling all the Texas team members of Salesforce that if they want to move out of Texas, they will help. Pretty cool move, actually. It was a rare instance in which the CEO weighed in on policy that sparked a political and legal firestorm. The lack of corporate pushback in Texas has sparked hand-wringing in the corporate world should CEOs prioritizing profit-making as they traditionally have, or should they forcefully wade in debates on social issues and public policy on behalf of their own customers, employees, and shareholders. Few have been as outspoken as Benioff, who founded Salesforce in 1999 after previously working at Oracle. Salesforce has grown to become a giant in software service for corporations, recently acquiring Slack. And here's his quote. All I want to say to my employees is, I have your back. He said, that is, I will take care of you. We need a new capitalism that is far more fair, more equitable, more sustainable capitalism that values not just all shareholders, but all stakeholders. Benioff defines stakeholders more broadly than most of his contemporaries. And he says, when I first started, I don't think there were a lot of CEOs who were willing to speak out and really take positions outside of maybe their product. I think it's hard leading a company sometimes to figure out what the company position is, says Deborah Lee, a chairman and CEO of BET. Okay, so we'll go tweet that one out and go to the next one from Katerina from The Atlantic. The headline says, the staggering number of kids who have lost a parent to COVID-19, even if children are less vulnerable to the coronavirus, they don't suffer any less from the loss it causes. Throughout the pandemic, media outlets and online dashboards have provided constant updates on the number of people who have died from COVID-19, far less prominent, but just as striking are the tallies of those left behind. According to an estimate published recently in the journal called Pediatrics, at least 140,000 American children had lost a parent or caregiver because of the coronavirus, meaning that one of roughly 500 children lost one of the most important adults in their life. They say that as of earlier this month, the total had reached 170,000.
Tyler, and I wonder whether if we were to drill down into the data, we would see patterns, because it's about access to healthcare. It's about, so many different factors. And so I wonder whether certain populations will be more disproportionately affected than others because of other types of systemic or political or, geographic, whatever the indicators may be. But I imagine that there will be some communities that will be more affected than others.
Mm-hmm. Where do we go here? Oh, next up from Katerina, synthetic biology moves into the realm of the unnatural. The field of synthetic biology has had great success engineering yeast and bacteria to make chemicals, biofuels, pharmaceuticals, fragrances, and even a hoppy flavor of beer, cheaply and more sustainably, with only sugars as the energy source. So let's all pray that this fixes our plastic addiction. It says, yet the field of synthetic biology yet the field has been limited by the fact that microbes, even with genes thrown in from plants and other animals, can only make molecules by using the chemical reactions of nature. Much of chemistry and the chemical industry is focused on making substances that are not found in nature with reactions invented in a laboratory. A collaboration between synthetic chemists and synthetic biologists at UC Berkeley and Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory has now overcome that hurdle, engineering bacteria that can make a molecule that until now could only be synthesized in a laboratory. While the biosynthesis of the bacteria E. coli produced a substance of low value and in small quantities, the fact that the researchers could engineer a microbe to produce something unknown in nature opens the door to production of a broader range of chemicals from yeast and bacterial fermentation. It's a completely new way of doing chemical synthesis, the idea of creating an organism that makes much of an unnatural product that combines laboratory synthesis with synthetic biology with living organisms. It's just a futuristic way to make organic molecules from two separate fields of science in a way nobody's done before, says UC Berkeley. The findings were published online today in Natural Chemistry. The achievement could greatly expand the applications of synthetic biology, which is a greener, more sustainable way to make chemicals for consumers and industry, says Berkeley Lab senior scientist. Here's the quote. There is just so much need in our lives right now for sustainable materials that won't impact the environment. This technology opens up possibilities for fuels with desirable properties that can be produced renewably, as well as new antibiotics, new nutraceuticals, new compounds that would be exceedingly
Nutraceuticals.
nutraceuticals. Thank you. New compounds that would be exceedingly challenging to make using only biology or only chemistry. I think that this is the real power of this. It expands the range of molecules we can address. We really need disruptive new technologies, and this most definitely is one of them.
Like I don't see him here, but this is the crazy stuff Eli's working on.
Yeah.
He's not doing biology; he's doing molecular chemistry or something. But it's going to be a crazy future. Like they say, the next 10 years is going to be like 100 years of technological evolution. So buckle up.
It says we could engineer organisms to make all sorts of drugs, agrochemicals, and even commodity chemicals like monomers and polymers that would take advantage of the efficiency and selectivity of fermentation and biocatalysts. Well, they need to convert that into Apple simple headlines, because that shit's still going to go over the heads of the everyday folks until you say we're going to make phones out of that you can eat at
Eh,
a
I
tenth of the
like that you
price.
said.
Yeah.
I like that you said Apple simple. It's what I've been trying to and I know this is a monologue, but it's what I've been trying to kind of explain is that they have this way where they use 5 words to explain everything, and then a single sentence to really wrap it up.
Yeah, Jobs understood this fundamental. I mean, that was the core of what Apple is explaining very technical shit to you know Grandpa Joe and Aunt Sally in a way that they get excited about it, and they've done that better than anybody. And for whatever reason, researchers, as you just heard me read in that article, cannot bring themselves to speak in down to earth English language. So there's a huge opportunity for people who can take all of that geek speak and turn it into, very simple um, marketing and products. And it's a shame they can't do it, because people should absolutely, their minds would be blown if they understood what's really starting to happen with synthetic biology. Like I'm saying, edible fucking phones. Like that's the kind of
Yeah,
the
like
iPhone
Ed
14
Evans at a
will be fucking edible. If you find yourself lost in the forest, you could eat the fucking thing. Like that's the type of marketing, that you need to get people's brains to wake up to what's going to be possible.
you would see it. It's an iPhone 14, and the ad just says, "You look good enough to eat."
Yeah,
And because it's made out of biopolymers, you can.
yeah. Or you could plant it in the ground and it'll grow a tree. It's like we're making not only products that are not bad for the environment, we're going to start making products that are actually good for the planet. Everything that you've ever bought before that was bad, that was lowering, causing the great plastic garbage patch in the oceans, that's potentially causing the massive decline in birth rates due to lowering fertility rates in males and blah 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 blah. Yeah, we fixed that.
I'm grinning ear to ear because it's going to be like a future where it's like, please do litter, because if you
Right,
litter, you're helping the earth.
right. Would you please take 5 plastic bags, at the supermarket, and drop them off on your way home, because they'll grow trees.
Let's live that world, guys.
Well, I mean, but that's why can't they communicate that in these scientific articles? Like, just convert it into a way to get people excited. That's how exciting it is, and yet nobody's
I
aware of it
I,
because the geeks
I
can't
I
figure
mean,
out a way to engage the.
and Ty, I tried to bring this up in the. I'm sorry, it's now turning into the Chris Tyler show. But I remember I tried to bring it up when we were talking to the doctors about misinformation. I'm like, you guys have one of the world's best, storytellers to help you refine a story about how you need to do it. And they were like, oh God, we can't lie to people. We can't make up a hypothetical story. Like it's like, come on. I'm just trying to tell you, if you don't get the shot, you might die. And it's like, no, we can't do that, guys. We got to present the data. we got to present both sides. We got to bring it all out onto the table. And it's like the average person doesn't have the cognitive load to figure out what they want for dinner.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So,
Tyler,
yes.
before you go on, since we are on this misinformation part, there's an audience, I think by the name of Amin. He back channeled me. Sorry, I just saw this. Did you mention something about Iran just now?
We were talking about Iran a while ago.
Okay, so he said that there was false news about Iran. I don't know who mentioned that, but the clubhouse is working fine in Iran without any filtering at the moment, just for your information.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Amin.
Okay, next one is from Katerina from The Atlantic. It says, scrubs and sexism go hand in hand. Female doctors have always faced a sartorial double standard. That only got worse during the pandemic. Oh, good. So it's, let's see here. In the spring of 2020, as Boston's first COVID-19 wave raged, I was the gastroenterologist on call responding to a patient hospitalized with a stomach ulcer, wearing a layer of yellow personal protective equipment over a pair of baggy scrubs. I spent 30 minutes explaining to him that he needed an endoscopic procedure. We built rapport, and by the end of our conversation about the pros and cons, he seemed to agree with my recommendation. I told him we would be ready to perform his endoscopy within half an hour. Well, before we do anything, I'm going to need to discuss it with the doctor. I blinked. When I entered the room, I had introduced myself as the doctor. I had also just explained in great detail a highly specialized procedure. Of course, he still assumed I was a nurse or a medical technician or a physician assistant, anything but a doctor, especially his doctor. I wish I could tell you his assumption was rare, but it's not. A recent study in the Journal of American Medical Association revealed that patients were about 20% less likely to assume that a woman wearing scrubs was a surgeon compared with men. The study also found that patients consider a woman in scrubs to be less professional than a man in the same outfit because many hospitals, including mine, require workers to wear scrubs and PPE during the pandemic. This became an even bigger problem than usual for female physicians. Okay. Retweeting that one out to the Tech News Twitter account. And then we've got this one from Katerina. Why everyone is so rude right now. From Time. Time.com. The long separation has made social interactions more fraught. Here's why. According to psychologists, September 2021 was a bad month for manners. On the 21st of September, a woman pulled a gun on servers at a Philadelphia fast food restaurant when they asked her to order online. On the 16th, several women from Texas pummeled a hostess at a New York City family-style restaurant. A few days prior to that, a Connecticut mother was investigated for slapping an elementary school bus driver, and that same week, a California woman was charged with felony assault for attacking a Southwest Airlines flight attendant and dislodging some of her teeth. Re-entry into polite society is proving to be a little bumpy. Of course, it's the people have lost their ever-loving minds incidents that makes the news, but they are also a reflection of a deeper trend. Americans appear to have forgotten their manners, especially with those whose job it is to assist them. Lawyers are reporting ruder clients. Restaurants are reporting ruder clients. Flight attendants, for whom rude clients are no novelty, are reporting mayhem. FAA fines for unruly behavior have already exceeded $1 million this year. So legion are the reports of discourtesy that some customer-facing businesses have been forced to play Miss Manners. Visitors to the Indiana University Health System are now greeted by a sign that reads, "Please take responsibility for the energy you bring into this space. Your behaviors matter." The Cleveland Clinic uses what it calls behavioral contracts when patients' behavior is continually difficult. The clinic issued 9 such contracts in 2017. So far this year, 111. It's not just mental health. The Rhode Island Hospitality Association, after an emergency meeting in July, devised a Please Be Kind toolkit for its members, including downloadable posters. The Massachusetts Restaurant Association launched a billboard campaign to remind patrons that restaurants are still coming back up to speed, so things might move a bit slower than usual. Nevertheless, people have been so rude that at least one restaurant in the area felt obliged to close for a day to give its employees time to recover from the impoliteness of the guests. Some people may have thought that, having been prevented from mingling with other humans for a period, folks would greet the return of a social activity with hugs, revelry, and fellowship, but in many ways, say psychologists, the long separation has made social interactions more fraught. The combination of a contagious, life-threatening disease and a series of unprecedented, life-altering changes in the rules of human engagement have left people anxious, confused, and, especially if they do not believe the restrictions were necessary, deeply resentful. We're going through a time where psychologically people's threat system is at a heightened level, says a psychologist. The period of threat has been so long that it may have had a damaging effect on people's mental health, which for many has been further debilitated by isolation, loss of resources, the death of loved ones, and reduced social support. Half of people fear COVID, half the people fear being controlled. So the fear affects everybody. During COVID, there's been an increase in anxiety, reports of anxiety and depression, and increased demand for mental health services. Yep. Next one from Evan, that a museum, an art museum in Vienna, has launched an account on OnlyFans to display their explicit works, which are normally banned on social media, which is kind of genius. So now you can see nudes, as they're called in the art world, that are normally banned from Facebook and Twitter and whatnot. What a genius PR campaign. The city of Vienna is taking an offbeat approach to the censorship of art that has turned to using the adults-only online platform OnlyFans to post its most explicit artworks on full display. The tourism board for the Austrian capital is now presenting art from 4 of Vienna's most revered museums on the adults-only platform in response to the blocking of some artistic content containing nudity on social media. That's funny. The next one is from David about the big strike in Hollywood. This is from Variety, Hollywood's potentially one of the biggest publications. Close to deal to avert crippling Hollywood strike. The sides sorted through numerous thorny issues in a marathon bargaining session that went late into Friday night, industry sources said. And what else do we have? Ken sent in this one that from MSN that Netflix estimates Squid Game will be worth almost $900 million. And Monica sends in one from Wired that the UK's startup founders are way too posh. Here's how to fix that. Nearly half of UK entrepreneurs, tech CEOs were independently educated, but until firms start paying attention to socioeconomic diversity, things won't get better. Well, they're having a boom of unicorns, but I guess they're positioning that as a problem. And then Ken had this one from the New York Times that Instagram struggles with fears of losing its pipeline young users. And this is a nice, another in a long series of jabs from the New York Times at their friends at Facebook who are stealing their ad revenue. And it's just what an interesting claim this is. It's just a one little data point out of one little slide that from years ago that showed that Instagram is focused on young users. Believe it or not, they're advertising to young users. They're worried about competing with TikTok and Snapchat for young users, and the New York Times feels like that's worthy of an article. That a social media platform is focused on getting young users. That Instagram. I know one place where young users aren't looking, and that's the New York Times. They're looking at TikTok, and Instagram is obviously concerned about that, as they should be. But that's not newsworthy at all. And the Washington Post, somebody named Big ZO or Big Zo sends in this one from the Washington Post. Racial bias hurt Black-owned small businesses seeking pandemic relief. The report found that Black-owned businesses had better luck with online lenders using automated systems. Oh, hang on, that's a counter-narrative. That's a narrative violation. Automated systems are supposed to be racist. The media tells me that every day, that the AIs are all racist. But maybe this headline implies that potentially algorithms are less biased than humans. Oh, and that's a really interesting point. That's a really interesting point because the focus of the headlines are the algorithms are racist, because you can find discrepancies that algorithms will favor one demographic more than another. That inevitably will happen. They're not foolproof. So it turns out, though, that humans also do it, and potentially even more than the algorithms do. So I love the way that this headline is worded, because now for the first time we're acknowledging that both things can be true simultaneously. That algorithms can be racist, but less racist than humans. And that's the important part that's been missing. Autonomous Tesla cars crash all the time. They kill people, but they crash less often than human drivers. Do you see how important the context is in this? Instead of writing the headline that an autonomous Tesla crashed into another car, an autonomous Tesla crashed into another car, they're crashing into cars. They're killing people. They're killing people. They're killing people. They're killing people. That may be true. But the important part is it an improvement over what we've been doing for the past 5,000 years? It is. So why are you writing about it as if it's a fucking problem?
Well, it's not so simple because forgiving a machine is a lot harder than forgiving a human being in
But
many
yeah,
places.
but the algorithms do have biases, just like humans, but generally, perhaps less, it turns out. So that's why I love this article. And this could be very interesting. And this could be of a huge benefit to the startups that are, as this article says, the report found that Black-owned businesses had better luck with online lenders using automated systems because they're less biased. Finally, some sanity in the reporting there. That seems to be what, based on my limited exposure to that space, seems to ring true. Oh my god! Oh my god! Lucast or Luckcast in our audience just found the most amazing photo I've ever seen. Oh my god! I just tweeted it. It's a photo of a homeless man sitting in a classic homeless man environment, surrounded by trash, on a urine-soaked sidewalk with a tent, with a full-on Oculus VR headset and hand controllers. Oh my god! Wow, what a photo!
He got his $600 though. I mean, I'm not picking on him. It's just we had $600 to spend.
That photo says more about. Oh my god! That is an award-winning photo. That's amazing. Wow!
All right, I gotta check it out.
That's crazy. What a great photo. Okay, next up here, everyone's reporting on the China nuke one that we read. David Craze sends in this one that programming in natural language is coming sooner than you think. Well, God, I hope so. It's been a while. Sometimes major shifts happen virtually unnoticed. On May 5th, announced Project CodeNet to very little media or academic attention. But we did see OpenAI. What do they call theirs? Codec, right? Codex, where we did the live stream where they were doing natural language programming, both text and voice, where you could tell if you want to make an app. In fact, they gave the example of making a video game, and they did it both in text and in voice. And they said, hey, draw a man on a screen. Okay, great. Make him move left and right on the bottom of the screen. Okay, put a rock at the top of the screen. Okay, make the rock fall straight down. Let me control the man with my arrows on my keyboard. Okay, great. Now I've made it, and give the man a gun to shoot up at the rock. If he hits the rock, make the rock break. Make more rocks fall from the top of the screen randomly, and then avoid the guy. And then if the rock crushes the man, start the game over. And they made a game just like I just did in 30 minutes in those steps. And that's natural language computer programming. And the question is, why don't we have that, more of that? Why is it all in gobbledygook, JavaScript and whatnot? It's very arcane, way to communicate with a computer. And so this article is all about how natural language programming is on the horizon, which it is, and that what that's going to do is dissolve the boundaries between the people and making apps. And today you have a few million people making apps, and in the soon you could have billions of people making apps. And that's a really, really beautiful thing. So the next one is from David Crace from Bitcoin.com, that Jack Dorsey says Square is considering building a Bitcoin mining system based on custom silicon, meaning their own processors. That's often how it works, is you want to make incredibly efficient, specialized processors to do Bitcoin mining. Ideally very energy efficient and very fast and very specialized for that purpose. And if they do it ideally, similarly, today, there's a whole lot of friction to becoming a Bitcoin miner. It's complicated to set up for Aunt Betty and Uncle Joey. However, if I think there's a huge opportunity for making a Bitcoin mining rig as simple as plugging in a smartphone into a wall, where you just buy the thing, you bring it home, you plug it in, connect it to an internet cable, you're done. And if somebody does that, oh boy, that can be very interesting. And especially if it could detect if the source of the energy was green or not. That would be bonus points for that. That would be amazing. So next up is Cheryl found one here, that neuroscientists unveil a brain atlas for movement control. A brain motor cortex map may accelerate neuroscience. Yes, and more importantly, it will vastly accelerate brain computer interfaces, because that's what we're going through in a very big way at the moment, is mapping the brain so we can figure out where to put the cables so we can jack into the matrix. That's what's happening. If you've been following the headlines as we have been doing for the past many months, that's what's going on, folks. They are not slowly, or rather quickly, making surprisingly rapid progress in mapping out the brain. In fact, somebody just won a Nobel Prize for it. So,
By the way,
yes.
the writer of that article is Cami.
Cammy.
Yay, Cammy.
Woohoo! I think she's sleeping.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say that earlier too, that I think this is Cammy's article because she had read it earlier.
Yeah. And it's we talked about synthetic biology and how that's going to change the game. And it will especially change the game if the cable that jacks into your head is based on synthetic biology. That will cause less of a reaction from your immune system. So you don't have to take immunosuppressant drugs to plug the cable into your brain, because your immune system will attack any foreign object.
Tyler, just a word to the audience: don't try to plug any cables into any orifices in your body, especially lightning cables into your wiener or cables into your brain. right now. Maybe in 10 years.
Okay, and Faraz sends in this one from the Middle East, that from Bloomberg, Uber and Careem. Careem is the Uber of the Middle East, founded by a Swede, actually, from Stockholm. So Uber and Careem said to face $100 million bill in Saudi tax squeeze. Uber acquired Careem. Saudi Arabia has slapped several technology firms, including Uber and its Dubai-based subsidiary Careem, with a tax bill for $100 million. Ouch. And boy, is everyone sharing this article that Accenture acquires 60,000 Oculus Quest 2 headsets for training its team members, as they're going big in the metaverse. Interestingly, Accenture has a very deep relationship with Facebook, which owns Oculus, which is not mentioned in this article. For example, Accenture is the leading firm doing the content moderation, the human content moderation for Facebook. So when your crazy, stupid high school buddy who spouts off a whole bunch of nonsense and needs to be moderated, that's being done most often by Accenture, who's doing that, managing all that moderation. So there's obviously a very long, rich history, and they're making more than $1 billion a year doing that for Facebook, by the way. So the fact that they bought 60,000 Oculus Quest 2 headsets from their friends at Facebook might not be as surprising as it sounds, because Facebook, their biggest customer, is going full on into VR, right? Mark Zuckerberg himself said the future of Facebook is the metaverse. We are a metaverse company. Okay, so if Accenture's biggest customer is Facebook, and Facebook is becoming a metaverse company, perhaps they should have some metaverse headsets, aka VR Oculus Quest 2s, because the future content moderation that they might be doing might be happening in the metaverse. So this headline actually makes a lot more sense than the journalist understands, because that everything I just explained is not mentioned in the article. Okay, so next up, chip shortage could persist for another 2 to 3 years. The global chip shortage could persist for 2 to 3 years, says the president of Hisense, one of China's largest household goods makers. And then Katerina sends in this one, that after 2 years, sunscreen that includes zinc oxide loses much of its effectiveness and becomes toxic after 2 hours of exposure. Oh shit. That's not good. And I remember growing up in the beaches of San Diego where we rubbed zinc oxide all over ourselves as kids. Lovely. And the next one. Oh, it's the teen girls developing tics story yet again. How to program DNA robots to poke and prod cell membranes. I'm tweeting that one out from Katerina. That's genius. Scientists have worked out how to best get DNA to communicate with membranes in our body, paving the way for the creation of mini DNA robots. The future is going to be crazy, yo. Super crazy.
Buckle up.
It's going to get... You think it's crazy now? You have seen nothing yet. We are watching the trailer for the crazy that's about to ensue.
All right, let's make a prediction. Who on stage will be the first in a flying car, and when? 2 years?
I suspect I will. Well, there's a ton of them.
As a
Lilium,
passenger?
Volocopter, Hyundai. Now Honda says they're going into it. The one in...
Like, I think Tyler's gonna like take a test cruise probably in the next year.
Oh, I had Lilium at my event. They didn't bring their device, which their flying car. It was...
Tyler, you need to have a soundbite for the Jetsons now too.
Yeah, That would be good for these futuristic.
Oh my God, that's so true. Because remember how they used to have the whole sort of intro to the Jetsons, Tyler?
The
Yep, me,
Jetsons.
Like literally,
me,
I'm the
George
Trader Joe
Jensen.
Chris here. Like, really, that'd be kind of fun. And the woman who said it couldn't recognize the voice.
So scientists have worked out how to best get DNA to communicate with membranes in our body, paving the way for a certain type of mini biological computers in droplets that have potential uses in biosensing and mRNA vaccines. It discovered the best way to design and build DNA nanostructures to effectively manipulate synthetic liposomes, tiny bubbles which have traditionally been used to deliver drugs for cancer and other diseases. By modifying the shape and reactivity of liposomes, there are far greater applications such as building small molecular systems that sense their environment and respond to a signal to release a cargo, such as a drug molecule when it nears its target. One major application of our study is biosensing. You could stick some droplets in a person or patient. As it moves through the body, it records local environment, processes this, and delivers a result so that you can read out the local environment. This work shows new ways to corral liposomes into place and then pop them open at just the right time. What's better is because they are built from the bottom up, out of an individual parts we design, we can easily bolt in and out of different components to change the way they work. And this is a whole lot of geek speak as usual. But we're going to become androids, everybody. That's the long and short of that one. The next one from Cheryl from NPR. Sitting too much drags down your mental health. The good news is that something as simple as some very light movement around the house to break up all of that couch surfing time can make a difference in mood. Good to know. And Poppy sends in this one that the great resignation is finally getting companies to take burnout seriously. 42% of women say they have consistently felt burnt out at work in 2021. That's 42%. Both men and women are feeling even more burned out in 2021 than they were in 2020. Well, that makes sense. And Facebook says AI can enforce its rules, but the company own and oh Jesus, I love how they worded this. The Wall Street Journal version that Ken found. Facebook says AI will clean up the platform. Its own engineers have doubts. No, not exactly. You're twisting what's actually happening there over there at Facebook because you're an activist. You're trying to take down Facebook because they're stealing your ad money. You should stop doing that, Wall Street Journal. It's a bad look. You look desperate. You should have done this thing called journalism that you built your legacy and your brand on, and just called up Facebook and said, "Hey, Facebook, we got this document. It's several years old, where one of your engineers back in years ago made a comment on a document saying that only 3 to 5%, that the AIs are only able to remove about 3 to 5% of hate speech. What's going on? We're going to write a story about that. Oh, you've made advances. You figured out other ways to remove hate speech. Oh, it's actually not, hate speech isn't really a huge problem at Facebook, which pretty much anyone reading this article can verify for themselves. Everyone knows their own lived experience with Facebook. You're not really being exposed to hate speech on Facebook. So why is the Wall Street Journal trying to sabotage, do economic terrorism on Facebook? Wall Street Journal, why are you doing economic terrorism on one of your competitors?
They seem to be getting really salty, Tyler.
Seriously salty over there.
Tyler, I think you should call it attempted terrorism because I don't think it's working.
You have a point. You have a point. Okay.
Tyler,
Yes.
going back to your burnout piece, I was just looking at across my feed on LinkedIn, and they just are giving time off now for women that lose a child or go through menopause.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're actually giving more time off to women in the workforce that are going through those pivotal times in their life. And I find that incredibly, incredibly powerful because if you also start to see, I would be very curious to see how much of the world's population that's actually working are women.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, I would be very curious to see the population, the demographics of offices and large corporations. How many of them are women? Especially when you start looking down the different the organizational network and like the different tiers and the different roles and the different business streams. If you can imagine, most of the soft sides of the, it's unfortunate, but most of the soft sides of the soft skills on an organizational network tend to be female, like marketing, comms, HR. I mean, like, look at it. I mean, I'm quite curious how many of those companies that are also looking to sort of reassess burnout, how many of, what is the population, what is the percentage of gender in their companies that are women versus men? Because women and men handle burnout very differently. And also women go through stages in their life where they experience even more burnout just by nature of who the nature of the human condition, nature of the human body, nature of the fact of being a woman versus a man. I'd be very curious to see that number.
Mm-hmm. So we in Dave McGinty, who joins us regularly, sent in the article about the facial recognition in UK schools. They say that it's currently being used for the cafeterias to pay for the food in the cafeterias. Having taught in schools in California, in Los Angeles, boy, there's an incredible opportunity. For example, potentially, I would love to get the feedback from the audience in the minutes we have left here about. Well, I'll share the one last headline, and then we'll have this little chat. The headline is from Dr. Fran from New York Magazine that Michael Burry, the investor from The Big Short, thinks that Bitcoin is a bubble. Okay, so that's your last headline. And the question I have that to leave us all with is, now that facial recognition is getting quite trivial, if we had it in schools, in a way, by the way, China does this, where in the classroom there's a camera at the center of the school of the room, looking at the kids, at all their faces with facial recognition on. China already has this, by the way, whereby if a child is acting crazy in the classroom, or whenever that the parent, if your child does something in the classroom, you as the parent have an app where it turns on and it shows what your child's doing in that classroom at that time. You get a notification. Your child's talking in the classroom. Your child's doing something in the classroom, which you might get a couple times a day, whatever. But then you could see what your kid did in class that day. They raised their hand on this thing. They gave this answer on this thing, whatever. You'd have this cute little thing. Might that not be, I mean, I'm telling you as a teacher who taught in really difficult schools, this would make the teacher's job incredibly easier and harder. The teacher would have to be a good teacher. Good teachers would love this. Bad teachers would hate this. Teachers' unions would never allow this. It's not an issue. This cannot happen. But at charter schools, it could happen. But in public schools with unionized teachers, it could never happen. But that could be super interesting. Anywho, we got to pause because I have our friend Andreas, who used to join us every day here in Tech News Around the World when we were just getting started 6 months ago.
Yep.
Is coming to have lunch with me in about 3 minutes.
That's nice. Say hello to him.
Well, he said,
Yeah, hi. Wow.
he said hello to you, Cheryl, when I had dinner with him a couple days ago.
Tell him I miss him. Ask him to come back soon.
Yeah.
Bye.
I will.
Enjoy.
Alrighty. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you in about 5 hours for the Apple live stream with
Have a
the
great one.
new
Thanks,
MacBook
Tyler. Bye,
Pros,
everyone.
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.
Thanks,
It's
Yay,
going to be
Tyler.
dope.
Sarah.
Bye bye.
See you
Bye,
soon.
guys.
Bye.
Have fun, everyone.